Back. Okay, well, good morning, members and colleagues, and welcome to the Skye and Raasay Area Committee. A committee is on Raasay agus and Skye for the 1st of December. So we'll start off, as always, Alistair, with the apologies for absence.
There's no apologies, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And have we any declarations of interest or transparency statements, please?
I do, Chair. Just bear with me. Yeah, I got a transparency statement from Councillor Miller in relation to item 3 on the agenda, as he has a family member who works for Police Scotland but not serving in the Highland Division. He does not consider that he has an interest to declare. And also a transparency statement from Councillor Miller in relation to item 5 as a Director of Highland. Given the report is for information purposes, he does not consider that he has an interest to declare. And also from Councillor Gillis, a transparency statement in relation to item 4, as she is a Director of Raasay Development Trust. Given the item is for information purposes, she does not consider that she has an interest to declare. That's it, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Alistair. Okay, members, with your approval, the order, we might need to change the order as the day goes on, because there are other area committees taking place and some officers are covering both. So if anything does change in terms of getting members, officers in to present reports, I'll keep you posted. But just to check you're happy, if that's the case, that we move the agenda around.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, we're going to start off then with the Police Scotland Local Committee Performance Report. And once again, I'd just like to mention that it's not really local enough for members. It is kind of a generic Highland, South Highland report. And I know that Inspector Mackenzie had indicated previously it was down to resource within Police Scotland that they weren't able to, to create the very local report that we used to get. So we're delighted to have Scott with us, Chief Inspector Scott Robertson. So I think it was important, Scott, to just reiterate, we would much prefer if we were getting more local information. And I do know, having attended some community councils, that officers who do turn up at community council meetings actually have that local information at hand. So just to say, we'll keep prodding and pushing to see if we could get back to the way it was. But anyway, over to you, Scott, for what you've got for us today.
Thank you, Chair, and noted with regards to the local side of things, and appreciate for you inviting me on here today. I thought I'd give you a quick introduction as to why I'm here and not your usual Chief Inspector or Inspector, if that's okay. I'm Scott Robertson. I'm currently the local area commander in Orkney and have been for nearly the last 3 years. My background has been 31 years of policing, mainly in the east of Scotland, in various guises, but with a real community focus, of which I understand Skye being a real and Raasay being a real community. So I've been a community constable, a sergeant and inspector at various times in my service, but I've also served in national departments as well, from professional standards to COP26 planning team more recently, and custody division as well. So I understand some of the challenges, particularly I can relate now as the local area commander in Orkney, relate to some of the challenges you have in Skye with regards to remoteness, if you like, from elsewhere. And I think having recently watched some of the Highland cops on television, you'll notice, and it brings it home when there's a crash on one of the main routes through Skye, if the road is closed, and the impact that has on locals and residents. So yeah, fully aware of that sort of remoteness and problems that may cause. So this report is covering the 1st of April to the 30th of September 2025. And what I'll do is I'll go over the sort of highlights, if you like. Also having spoken to Inspector Mackenzie prior to coming here, who's updated me. But if there is any specific stats or specific questions about little things, I might need to refer them to the inspector going forward. I've been covering for the last sort of 3 or 4 months in the South Highland area as well as Orkney, and I'm hoping that that won't be for too much longer. With Don Allen, the local area commander, not being able to come to these meetings currently. So I like to highlight, I think roads policing touched on it there with Highland cops, and we're really quite lucky, I think, in Skye and Raasay. We do have the roads policing help from our specialist roads policing department, who come across roughly once a month, I'm told, and they help with enforcing legislation on Orkney and enhancing road safety, and importantly investigating a lot of the road traffic collisions that happen. And I know I know locally that the recent road upgrades over the last wee while have reduced call demand to Police Scotland and increased that sort of visitor improvement at behaviour with regards to the sort of tourists, and they get slightly better a better service, I suppose, because of these sort of improvements at the beauty locations, etc., the road upgrades, which is it certainly helps us, particularly with that sort of call demand, that reduction in call demand, which is great. And you probably notice from the report, albeit acknowledge that it's not local, but it is across the South Highland area, that we have a sort of increase in detections of drink and drug driving offences, and that is down to that sort of increased enforcement area, and that is across this area as well, and it's across Scotland as well. And what probably surprises me a little bit is that this is day one of the festive drink and drug driving campaign that we have every year, and local officers will be out supporting that in Skye and Raasay. So please, yeah, if you do get stopped, please put up with us and bear with us when we're going through our procedures, please. But it is to make our roads safer. And I would encourage anybody listening to this call, if they do have any information with regards to anybody who is going to be drink driving or drug driving, particularly of when it's happening or even the morning after, if you have concerns about friends, colleagues, family, then please let us know so that we can do something about it and help make our roads safer. That'd be much appreciated. But yeah, so that the figures have slightly gone up in terms of detection raids. You'll also maybe notice a rise in the sort of fraudulent activities and the frauds there. That is common across not just the south, but across Scotland. And we try and publish information aimed at people to help safeguard themselves, and we've got protocols with sort of banking institutions, the financial institutions, and we try and reinforce that messages through that sort of medium. And what I'm referring to there specifically is if we've got somebody coming in perhaps a little bit vulnerable, and they're coming in wanting to make cash withdrawals, or they're wanting to send larger sums of money to somebody that they don't normally send money to, then the banking staff are primed and trained in terms of reporting these matters to the police and stopping these transactions at source, which is really helpful. You'll notice there's an increase in reports of missing people as well within this in this report, and I think this is probably a really good time to acknowledge the great superb work that our Skye Mountain Rescue Team colleagues do, as well as our other emergency partners who help respond to these, and that's from the helicopters to the SAS to the local doctors, nurses, and It's the volunteers that get from me. I see it when I cover the duty weekends and I cover the whole of the Highlands and Islands, and you see it when the mountain rescue teams at the drop of a hat come out to many calls and responses to us trying to help find somebody, and Skye Mountain Rescue are absolutely brilliant in coming out at the drop of a hat, because I don't need to tell you, we have a lot of missing people up the hills, unfortunately, but it's such a popular area. So I think this is a good juncture to acknowledge that. Now, I'm going to just go through the report. I think we've touched on the sort of road safety and road crime. In terms of the page 5 of the report with regards to antisocial behaviour, which includes the sort of drugs possession offences, I suppose it's worthy of note that we're quite considerably up this year from last year's drugs possession offences, which again is down to local proactivity, but also a lot of the work that's going on in the background and the support that we get from Inverness with regards to the specialist teams who come across and help as enforce drugs warrants, etc. So and this year's to date figures are actually even up on the 5-year average, so that's really encouraging for the officers in the area. It shows that despite some of the resourcing challenges that we've had in Skye, we're still managing to get these figures up to a really quite a decent level. We've touched on page 6, the acquisitive crime and the sort of frauds there, and in terms of the page 7, the protecting vulnerable people, again, the missing people have touched on there. And there's a breakdown sort of by category there, and you can see that this year there's sort of been 40 adults that have been missing out of the total of 88, and 40 children as well, so quite a mix of ages there. And then the crime statistics themselves, I probably won't go through them individually, but if you have specific questions or points that you'd like to raise, I'll certainly do my best to try and answer them as we go through. But I think just to highlight in Group 8 under the road traffic offences, what we call the fatal 5, which is the causation factors for fatal road accidents or seriously injured on our roads. The driving carelessly, the driving under the influence, the speeding offences, the seatbelt offences, and the mobile phone offences. You can see they're all up on last year, and in many aspects they're up on almost every previous year, except for a couple there. So really, again, really good proactivity by officers, and also with the support of our roads policing colleagues from Inverness and elsewhere, that Fort William, that come up. So I think that's important to acknowledge that, and these help to keep our figures down in terms of fatalities and killed and seriously injured. But I'm just looking through my notes from a meeting with Inspector Mackenzie, and I don't think there's anything else I'm going to raise at this juncture, but happy to answer questions. I see there's some hands up already, so thank you very much, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much, Scott. Okay, so we'll go to members. So we'll start off with Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks, Scott, for that. That's really interesting. Just a couple of points I'd like to pick up on. The first one's to do with the stuff you talk about with fraud. Do we have any more information on whether that fraud's being committed overseas, or if it's like door-to-door fraud within the Highlands? Because I think that's a very different sort of picture of what's happening. The second point is, I note what you're saying about drugs offences, violent offences. I think that takes me on to my next point, because I think a lot of these things are linked, and I'd like to know, that's definitely the perception that there is in our communities. A lot of the antisocial behaviour, sort of violence, is caused by drugs, the supply of drugs, whatever else. I'd be interested to know what your thoughts are on that. And I note the comments that you made about, the fact that these are going up sort of suggests a good thing, because it means that your team are being proactive in identifying some of these issues. So it would just be to get clarity. Is this are these stats at the sort of calls or whatever that you've attended? Because one of the concerns that I'm hearing from people is, people have said to me that they've maybe contacted the police about low level sort of like drug dealing or antisocial behaviour, and there's very sort of little interest in attending these sort of low level issues. So it is good to see that you're really tackling some of the motoring offences and the violent offences, but I think it's the low level drug stuff that I'm certainly hearing from people is where the real concern is, because even looking back the past sort of 4 or 5 years, it's not been the issue that it is today, and I think that's a very sort of visible indication of maybe what's going on in our society, and it's definitely not a good direction of travel. Or that's what I'm hearing on the ground anyway.
Scott, is we'll take questions for the members, and then you can come back and sort of answer them all in one go, so it makes life easier for you. Councillor Gillis.
Hi there. I just really appreciated the fact that you've pointed out the fact that the improvements in the roads have made such a difference to your the calls that you've been getting and having to deal with. One question is, how many incidents are you, this is one you're probably going to have to come back to us on, is the number of incidents where we've got poor weather and the roads department are having to stop whatever the work that they're doing and then go and respond to what are classed as emergency incidents and things like that. If we could get kind of a rough number of how often that is actually happening and the impact that's then having not only on yourselves but on the roads team. One question is, and this is in general as well, what is the meaning of the detection rates? So the stats that you've got in there, are they people that have actually been charged with something? What's that actual stat in those meanings within those bits of information that we're getting? And then this is with my crofter hat on. How do you record dog attacks and dog worrying incidents, especially in Highland? Because we are noticing within the agricultural circles quite an increase in incidents, and I was just wondering if how you're recording that and if you're seeing the same issues.
Okay, thanks, Chrissy. And I'll maybe just come in with a couple of questions as well, Scott. So first of all, thanks for recognising the work of Skye Mountain Rescue, and I think we also need to add the Coast Guard and the RNLI, within these, because these services are really valuable. And we know how many incidents they do attend in Skye. So thanks for recognising that. In terms of road traffic offences, and you mentioned that they're up, I suppose the question is how many of these are related to visitors or tourists, given how busy we know this part of the world is. And then just one I want to pick up, you mentioned there, the importance of reporting, drink driving incidents or offences, etc., etc. And I suppose, we have been concerned for a while about the coverage of officers in this area. For example, if somebody's lifted in Portree, 2 officers might be on duty and they've got to go to Inverness with that person. So say I reported what I thought was a really dangerous driver on the road. I tried to contact Police Scotland, and I have experienced this personally, after over an hour, no response. The officers are off the island, and that driver is still on the road, and potentially going to provide some really, really concerning incidents. What happens in that scenario? If we haven't got officers on Skye, there's a drunk driver being reported, it looks as if it's really serious, but there's no coverage. How would Police Scotland react to that situation? So you've got a number of questions there, Scott, so I'll hand back to you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, councillors, for your questions. I will try my best to answer them, but I may not be able to answer all of them. So just going back to Councillor Stewart's, and with regards to the specific question about fraud and whether they're overseas or door to door, I think nationally, and this is no change to Skye, we're seeing I go back 10, 15, 20 years, and your your fraud offences are quite often targeting vulnerable people in their houses and doing that sort of door to door and offering to carry out work at inflated prices, etc., or some other sort of scam in that regard. But very much the way and the statistics for fraud here that are mentioned are heavily weighted on online frauds, whereas you suggest that the persons are maybe not in the local area. Many are indeed overseas, but there's also some from out with, you know, Skye. They could not necessarily just be overseas. So yeah, there's a definitely on the sea of change is definitely heading towards online with suspects out with the area. So people really need to try and follow the advice that's out there with regards to keeping them safe online and keeping themselves safe online. And if you've got vulnerable friends, family, neighbours, relatives, then also making sure and helping them to combat this sort of fraud that's ongoing and rife in society. With regards to the drugs offences and the link to violence and antisocial behaviour, yes, is the probably answer to that one. Yes, there can be links with some of the drugs offences. Serious and organised crime is in South Highland area. You know, we do have some crime groups operating across the Highlands and Islands, unfortunately, and we've got our units that are targeting specifically that sort of high level thing. But from, you know, when you're moving on to the sort of low level drug dealers and maybe not getting feedback from Police Scotland, I can assure you that any call that is made to Police Scotland, be it anonymously, be it through our 101 999, through our Contact Us website, will be recorded, and that each little bit of information will be a little piece of a jigsaw that will be coming together. One piece of information on its own might not be enough for us to go and get a drugs warrant, go and target people, but the more information that we have, then the more likely we can get a drugs warrant and target the drug dealers that we want to get rid of out of society. So yeah, just reassurance on that. Please keep your constituents reporting even what you've described as sort of low level sort of drug deals, and we do, as I say, we do. Sometimes we don't get there immediately because we do need to reassess and assess the information. If that makes sense, sometimes we can't tend it immediately through whatever issue, but any information about any drug dealing, and particularly if it's not named people and it's happening at a certain spot or a certain area of town or wherever it is, then if it's happening repeatedly, then that's something that we can plan to target going forward. So please keep reporting these incidents is my plea with regards to that. Moving on to Councillor Gillies' incidents here about how many incidents and poor weather and about the sort of road stopping workers. I'm a wee bit confused if this is more aimed at council with regards to here, council, and excuse my ignorance here, because are you specifically in relation to police? Are you able to maybe clarify what you mean there about the impact on sort of policing?
Well, there was a number of incidents that we've been hearing about, such as one at Nice Point, where gritters were having to go over because people were without food and there was issues and they had got stranded and things like that. So just if you're able to actually clarify how often that's happening, we can save this for after the meeting. Obviously you won't have that information to hand, but it would be good to know what number of incidents and things like that are actually happening.
Yeah, I mean, we wouldn't record probably a road closure specifically as an incident, if that makes sense, but I suspect council maybe would on that one, and I'm maybe speaking out of turn here, so apologies for that if I am. Yes, weather is going to stop us going to anything like it will stop everybody in the community going about their business. If a road needs closed because of whatever it is, because of high winds, rain, snow, more likely ice, then yeah, that's something I'm not sure we would be able to have some statistics on, unfortunately, but perhaps the roads team would have with regards to closures. I know on the other area that I cover, you know, the Twitter feed or the Facebook of the local council will have updates on road closures as we go along, and the sort of length of road closures, etc., and when they're open again. And they very much help us up in Orkney with that regards. But I'm afraid I don't have that information for Skye, and I'm not sure I'll be able to get that, unfortunately, councillor, on regards to that one. With regards to the detection rates, what does that mean? Yes, that means that people are being reported for offences. Sometimes you'll see that either detection rates are high or low, and some of that is possibly because we've had to send items off for forensic testing, or we're waiting on something coming back from our lab. For instance, a drug driver, we need to wait for the results coming back before we can, you know, put a report in with regards to that. Whereas drink driving is a bit more immediate, and they can be charged and reported at that time. There is circumstances where a drug driver can be charged at the roadside, and where they're being absolutely incapable of driving, and they're, for want of a better phrase, they're kind of out their face, and yeah, very incapable of driving, so they can be charged with a Section 4 of the Road Traffic Act for something like that. But yes, the detection rate is about people who have been charged with things. And how do we record dog attacks or dog worrying incidents? This is something, generally speaking, across Scotland, particularly in the rural communities, that we do have a specific crime of dog worrying, as I'm sure you'll be aware. So that is recorded. I don't see it on the sheet here in terms of any recorded offences, or specific recording offences here, but it's probably something I can go away and find out, and for Skye, and I'll get Alistair Mackenzie to report back on that one, if that's okay. And come back with a sort of figure, if you like, on dog worrying for Skye, and see the prevalence of it, and see if that makes any difference here. I do know that all the incidents that are reported on a 24-hour basis will be gone through by the inspector and local sergeants, and given that sort of scrutiny, and if there's any patterns detected, then we'll come up with it. For instance, if there's one dog and lots of different incidents, etc., or one location, then we can provide some high-profile visibility if we think that's going to help. But I'm quite content that these incidents are recorded and in a local basis. But the figures themselves, I'll need to get back to you on, I'm afraid. And coming back to yourself, Chair, and just answering in the order that the questions were given. The first question was about how many of the sort of roads policing offences are relating to tourists, or are they relating to locals? I've not had time to go into a deep dive, obviously, with regards to the specifics here, but I do know that a lot of offences are in relation to tourists, and not just in Skye, but some offences are, and some of our fatalities and seriously injured and are on the road as a result of driving on the wrong side of the road. Now, I know you have many single track roads and things up in Skye, but there is also locals that will be in these roads policing offences. In particular, I suspect there'll be speeders, there'll be mobile phone, there'll be seat belts and whatnot. But yeah, it'll be a mix. But I suspect there'll be quite a large chunk will be relating to tourists, because as you well know, Skye gets his fair share of tourists. With regards to the importance of reporting the drink driving, and the specific, well, what happens if there's not a set or not a crew that's available to attend at that time for whatever reason. I'm afraid that's the very nature of policing. We don't, if we have 10 calls that come in at one time, I'm not going to be able to get somebody to all these 10 calls at once, so we'll prioritise them. We go through all calls to the police, go through our sort of control centre, and they are prioritised in that regard, and they're given a what's called a thrive importance of attendance, which is a mnemonic that goes through the threat, the harm, the risk, and some other things with regards to each call. So that helps us prioritise who we can get to them. And I feel like I'm dodging your question a little bit, Chair, with regards to your specifics. But if a car was dealing with, say, a drunk driver and had to go to the station to deal with him, then the reality of it is they would need to keep dealing with that until they're freed up from that. Getting somebody else across to Skye at short notice for the example you gave was a dangerous driving or extremely dangerous driver. Absolutely. Is that something we want to deal with? Absolutely. But we would probably need to look at following that up afterwards, and we can do that in various ways. We would try and collect footage. There's so many vehicles that have got dash cam footage on them these days, which is great and really useful to us. We'd be able to look at CCTV footage should they go through a sort of one of the major hubs, or the bridge or whatever. So there is other ways that we can follow this up, including sort of eyewitness reports, and we can go back to it later. But I appreciate your question, but that's not just Skye. I think that's across Scotland with regards to we can't go to incidents as we have it. And I'm digressing a little bit. I remember when I joined 31 years ago, and I sat in a briefing room at Gayfield Square Police Station, the city centre of Edinburgh. We had people out on foot beats in a small square answering treble 9 calls, because that was the quickest. The way to get to them at that time was to, when you're on foot uptown dealing with it. It's very much a changed picture now, I would suggest. But yeah, I hope that helps answer everybody's questions. And if I've not, I'm sure you'll come back to me, and happy to try to do follow-ups if that's okay.
Okay, yeah, absolutely, Scott. I think you've made every effort to, and as I say, we can invite Inspector Mackenzie into an area business meeting if there are still anything that members feel they haven't received an answer to. So once again, Scott, I can only thank you for your time today. Nice to see you. I hope your weather's a wee bit better than it is here in Skye, and we might see you again in the future. But thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, members, moving on to agenda item 4. As we've done at previous committees, just so we've got a flavour of what's happening in our area in terms of community development. So today I'm delighted that we've got representation from Raasay Development Trust. Sylvia Jameson, the development manager from Raasay, is with us today. And I believe you've only been on Raasay for a short time, Sylvia, so welcome to the area and welcome to this committee. And I think you've got a presentation to share with us.
Good morning, thank you. Yes, I'll just screen share. Give me a second.
Yeah, we're seeing that.
That coming up okay? It's just everybody see that okay?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. I'll just go for it. Morning, thank you for asking me to present. As the chairman said, I'm quite new to post. I started late September, but I'm neither new to islands, as you can probably tell, or to development trust work. I've done this line of work probably more than 3 decades, so I love it, and I'm really keen to work in Raasay. I go in every second week. I stay in Moray, but I stay in Raasay Monday to Friday every second week, which is really helping me get to kind of community. So I'll start with an overview about the trust, and then I'll go into projects that have been done or are ongoing and looking a bit ahead to the future, and then maybe take some questions at the end. So Raasay Development Trust was established in 2014. We're both a charity and a company. We have 3 staff, 2 full-time, of which I'm one, and Tom and Carwyn are the other 2 members of staff that work for Carbon Neutral Islands Raasay, which I'll come on to a bit later. We also have a number of contractors. We have one part-time person, Rosie McInnes, who works on our housing renovation project at the moment. And we also have a number of contractors working on invasive species reduction through Raasay as part of Carbon Neutral Islands. We have a good membership. Raasay's population is around 190 and we have 85 members out of that. We have around 20 volunteers, mainly on our Paths projects and also on our wood fuel project, which I'll come on to later. This doesn't include our board, which is a board of 7. We have been very reliant in the past on HIE funding. They funded my predecessor and lots of work within Raasay. A lot of that funding, as you probably are aware, has been reduced. And at the moment, the Carbon Neutral Islands is our main core cost funders and funds for staff. We are very good at bringing in external funding for project work, over 20 external funders in the last financial year, but as you'll be aware, the core cost is the more difficult one. We had our AGM last week, which was really well attended, between 30 and 40 people, and we had a bit of a struggle to get, we had 3 directors stepping down and we needed to renew 3. It's a challenge in Raasay, the number of committees and a small population recruiting. And we are beginning to look at alternative governance models to see if we can help that, looking at places like Knoydart and Egg and the way that they work. Is there a better way of doing things? We are members of the Development Trust Association Scotland, and we're doing a piece of work with them just now to look at longer term support and funding to give us a bit of sustainability. The Scottish Islands Federation, the Skye and Raasay Futures Group, and we are hoping to host visits by their members in March, and also the Community Woodlands Association. I must have this list, the Community-Led Housing Alliance, and was at their conference a couple of weeks ago, which is very off the moment just now. So just to fly through our objectives, why do we exist? So I'll not read this word for word, but to manage land and assets for the community, to provide recreational facilities and activities, to advance community development and rural regeneration, education about culture, environment and history, environmental protection, preservation and conservation of the natural environment, which is where Carbon Neutral Islands sits really well under RDT. We sort of host them within RDT, and the preservation of buildings and sites of architectural history or other importance to the community. So that's why we're here. So what have we achieved to date? I'll start with the Carbon Neutral Islands Raasay project, which began in 2022. We're one of 6 islands that the Scottish Government are piloting this model way to see if islands can be made carbon neutral, with the idea that bigger communities could maybe follow. So far, they've achieved a climate change action plan in consultation with the community, did a big energy survey of all the homes in Raasay, and so far 50 have been retrofitted, air source heat pumps, insulation, that type of thing. That work was done in partnership with Highland Council and Union Technical, and there more needs to be done. There will probably be a second phase and looking at funding to do some more. We're big hall. I was amazed at the size of it for the size of place. It's our first carbon neutral building in Raasay, and that's involved solar panels and changing external doors. And it's really quite a warm building, and increasingly helps it to be better used. I mentioned the habitat restoration, dealing with the invasive species, and we just updated members at the AGM that rhododendrons have been reduced by about 50%. That's a lot of our contractor work. We employ people regularly to do that. We're also trialling dealing with Japanese knotweed and different methods of getting rid of that. We have a lovely walled garden at the back of Raasay House, a Victorian walled garden, and a really active group that works there and sells produce back to the community to sustain the work there. We've done food growing classes. We've put an electricity into the garden and done a survey to look if we can reinstall the Victorian glass houses as a future project. And the big project that CNI are looking at the moment is a ground source heat pump for Raasay House, which I'm sure you can imagine is horrendous to heat. A design for that and looking at different appraisals, different ways of delivering that. So I'll just move on to RDT. So we have done the work developing and fundraising for two river hydro schemes. Obviously, this is before my time, but they began in 2022 and are now managed through a separate committee, Raasay Community Renewables. There's a community benefit fund, FAE, RCR, and the community voted to basically bank the money this past year and keep it for next year to do kind of more with it. Some of that funds for RCR will help fund my post. So we're beginning to work towards a bit of trying to be more self-sustaining. The last couple of years, the RDT sought funding to put in a pontoon for visiting yachts. There has been some challenges with it. There's been weather damage quite early on, and there are questions around the design and installation, which we are looking at, and looking at remedial works to fix it because it was proven popular, and we need to make it more secure, basically. We get more weather in that corner of the bay than I think was previously anticipated through earlier wave studies. So watch this space. A lot of volunteer work and a bit of funding through Paths for All for upgrading the paths through the island, which are popular with visitors. A big project was buying land for the Sheepstock Club and developing in partnership with Loch and Skye Housing Association 5 new social houses at Deer Park, which became tenanted last year. 3 are owned and managed through Communities Housing Trust by RDT, and Loch and Skye Association own and manage 2 more. We had a second piece of land above the site. We initially looked at for self-build plots, but which didn't work out. We sold it to Loch and Skye Housing Association. They've built 6 houses which should be tenanted hopefully by Christmas. So we are tackling the massive housing shortage in Raasay as best we can. As part to that, in the last year, we purchased 3 older terraced houses in Inverarish Terrace, and the works began a month ago to completely gut them and renovate them. 2 2-bed and 1 3-bed houses. They'll be ready in about September next year for tenants. Our wood fuel group is a really growing project. We use surplus heat for the river hydro scheme to dry logs, and the volunteers every Saturday morning cut this up, and we take orders and distribute as firewood back around the island. They started off with about 8 customers. They're now 80 plus, and last year they put out 290 cubic meters a large was what they delivered around the island. This is also our largest source of restricted funding for RDT, so we make quite a bit of money. We make 7 to 8 grand a year on unrestricted funding, which is really helpful for an organisation like RDT, and the volunteers are amazing. So I'll just move on to, so where are we going next? What's our plans? CNI are funding a direct wire project for the hydro scheme to the distillery so they can access some of this energy. We are hoping ground source heat pump to the next stage, the tender process. It's going to be very costly, so then there will be work to look at funding it. E-bikes for Raasay House, a community vehicle partnership with Cora. Cora is the retail association that manages the community shop and post office. They've recently bought the old Presbyterian Kirk to make a bigger shop and a social hub, so it would help all of that. They will be developing a carbon reduction strategy, and they're having to look quite hard at wood supplies. We're running out of wood at the Wood Fuel Group, and they have a felon licence in which they're waiting word back on. I think the next stage is community consultation to take out wood for Oskeg, and so there will be a period where we're busy winter months where they might have to buy in wood for Skye. So we're just looking at options there. From an RDT point of view, we have a small population, about 190, and we've both a CNI plan and a RDT one. So the idea will be in early spring to go out and ask what's changed, what have we achieved, what's no longer relevant, what's the new priorities. And I say that in regard particularly to the impact that whisky tariffs have had, that the distillery has been a huge thing for us. It helped our population to grow, our young people's population to grow, but the tariffs are biting. That's having an impact, and there's that shift RDT's focus. So we will see what the community tells us in the spring. As I mentioned, our houses in the terrace should be ready in September, and we will continue to look at resourcing the housing project. There is a need for more accessible housing for our older population, and I think we will continue to need other housing sources, but one of our difficulties is availability of land, so a bit of work to be done there. I mentioned the pontoon, so we've begun work looking at remedial appraisals to make that a first-rate facility. Alongside that longer term, we are looking, once we have capacity, at community asset transfer of the ferry terminal building. We're already in discussion with the council on that to give shoreside services like showers, information point, that type of thing, and that could develop further depending on where we go. Larger scale pathworks, which will involve attracting some external money to some of the really popular paths, including past Sorley McLean's cairn out to the cleared village of Harlake, which is really wheat and had a bit of livestock damage. So that's one of the things we're looking at. Employment diversification, this has become, as I mentioned, because of the whisky tariffs, I think more critical. And we'll see where this goes. One of the pieces of work is working with the Raasay Crofters Association, who bought the old ferry terminal building, and looking at trying to help them to develop that into a venison processing plant. And hopefully that longer term would help with employment diversification. A new project is the Big Spring Clean 2026 in partnership with the Community Council. And with Highland Council, we've had great help for Waste Services on joint work around taking out scrap cars, metal, and we will also work with Police Scotland on a bit of education around the legislation around scrap cars and running cars. So I'm flying through this, apologies, but I'm trying to stick to time. So any questions anybody has, I will try my best to answer, and if I cannot, I'll come back to Alistair, and I'll stop sharing now, but you get some contact details there on the screen as well.
Okay, thank you very much, Sylvia. Yeah, that was a very comprehensive summary, and it's great to see the diversity of things that you are involved in, and more importantly, the ambitions that you've got going forward. So maybe I'll come in with a couple of questions. I think you almost touched on it yourself there. I think, despite the fact there's only 190 residents on Raasay, there's a lot of different community groups doing a lot of different things. And I suppose for me, it might be how does the coordination of these groups all working together for the same, for the same ends? Is that something that you've identified as something that maybe needs to be tightened up? Because I think, maybe there's duplication. I mean, and I'm sure in a small place like Raasay, people maybe don't always get the information. So it's really about how effectively is the partnership working moving forward, and have you got an agenda where you're trying to pull all groups under the one umbrella so that you're all driving forward, you know, the same initiatives to get the really positive outcomes that are required. In terms of the three houses in Mararish, it'd be quite good to understand they're clearly in a state of upgrade at the moment, and it's how have your costs changed since you started this project, you know, to where you are now, and you know, are your timescales for being ready for September 26? You know, do you think they're realistic? And I think the whole issue around about the pontoons is really key, you know, given how important Raasay is in terms of maritime works and, dare I say, maritime tourism. So it'd be quite good to understand what you think. You're talking about an appraisal. What if the appraisal shows that there's income generation needed to make this feasible and to get even to extend them? So it'd be quite good to understand that. Okay, I'm just checking if any other members got their hands up. Chrissy probably knows everything, so she possibly doesn't need to ask. I don't know if Councillor Miller or Councillor Stewart have got anything. But if not, I'll go back to yourself to answer my questions.
No problem. I'll take your first scene about group coordination and duplication. Part of our work next year to engage with the community will be followed by a governance review. And I introduced it at the AGM an idea, maybe shifting our governance. I'm saying this very tentatively, reducing the number of groups. That will have to be an optional thing. And there's a fatigue, I would say, Chair, within committee, and Chrissy is nodding there, within a lot of the boards. We're fighting all the same people who are tired of moving from committee to committee. And there is a momentum and a interest in it. And we're developing, I'm started working on that already, and speaking to Egg and Noidard about their alternative models, where they work with one residents association, with subsidiary trading bodies to run different projects. So that work has begun. There is duplication, strangely enough, around things like the number of Zoom accounts that we pay for in Raasay. So there's a piece of work we've begun on a shared access within the Raasay website that all groups can access software and sources of help and have joint communication. We're aware as a trust we aren't maybe being the best at communicating with members, but we are shifting towards more regular, certainly quarterly updates to members, and not just relying on them logging into the website. We're getting better at publishing things online, like our minutes, and trying to be more transparent. So that is getting there. That a lot of that has been resourcing. There's been no member of staff for 6 months, and the board have been very fatigued and trying to firefight during that time. So now that we're fully resourced, that will hopefully get better. So I am not the expert on Inverarish Terrace. That would be my colleague Rosie, but costs, I think, have massively increased over the time that housing has been an interest to the Development Trust. We anticipate it to be finished on time. It is a local contractor, so they don't have to come in and out so much, and work is going full steam ahead. So I have no reason to doubt that they will be there and thereabout, but we are at the mercy of weather and supplies and everything else. So the pontoons, we have begun work, and we have somebody coming up with a plan to look at making I don't want to say too much at this stage, but making, using what we've got, but improving on it and making it more secure and weather withstanding. There will be money needed to do this, and part of the kind of my vision for the longer term plan is PR and promotion through sailing circles and developing onshore facilities. But we need the right offer ready and sustainable, and can take boats in lots of different weathers before we go out and market it. But we are confident we can get the usage to make that self-sustaining. But we will need grants to do the remedial work. There is no question.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Miller.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, thank you very much, Sylvia, for that presentation. Believe it or not, being a Skye boy, Raasay's always been a special place for me, because I was elected as a Raasay councillor way back in the 90s. So, I just interesting on your thing about the pontoons. I mean, I think this is the the second experiment with pontoons at Raasay, and the first one was a disaster. And I think your second one has not been great either. So I think, all these experts that come up, I think, I'm sure this time around you'll be using the knowledge of local fishermen and local people who know much better than university people who think they know everything, but turns out they know very little. So I think it would be, I wish you all the best for that project. But it's just, your whole presentation was really pretty exciting. For as I'm sure, well, I'm not going to teach Councillor Gillis how to suck eggs, but for many, many years, Raasay has just been left behind, I think, is maybe the polite way to put it, and not a lot happening. And now it seems to be everything's happening, and you're leading the way in many aspects of modern day life. So I just wish you all the best for the future, and I hope that in the remaining time that certainly I've got left on the council will support you as much as I can, and I'm sure other John Finlayson, I know he would do the same as the chair of the area. So I think you're very lucky in some ways. You've got local councillor there now living on the Raasay and seeing all the problems firsthand. Trouble is, she tends to go over to the mainland as well and causes some trouble over here. But no, I think you've got some fantastic plans, and to see the number of houses in the process, some being built, some about to be built, and some renovated. I think the secret will be to attracting young families over there, and that'll of course protect the little school as well, which I know has been having some nervous times over the last probably 10 years with school roll dropping, etc. So I think it all ties into attracting young people to go and live and raise families on the island. But I just wish you all the best for the future, and thank you for the presentation.
Thank you very much, Councillor. And I'll just on that school and population, I wrote down the figures. I thought you might be interested, because we have a baby boom, so which is really good. We have 3 in nursery, 3 at the primary school. We have 2 homeschooled, 5 at the high school, but we have 6 babies born or due, which is brilliant. So that's painting a really good picture. So that's what it's all about. Is the future.
Okay, Sylvia, that's good news in terms of the school roll and the potential school roll going forward. I think, as Drew has said, we really appreciate you coming along. It's a fantastic presentation. Lots happening on Raasay, and as well as Chrissy keeping us posted. I'm sure you'll also be welcome back anytime to give us updates on the number of projects that you are driving forward. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you. I've shared the slides with Alistair so he can share them later. And thank you for inviting me.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Okay.
Bye.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, moving on to item 5. I'm delighted to welcome Douglas Willoughby to our committee. Thank you for the report, Douglas. I think the report really articulates very clearly all the good work that is happening right across the ward in terms of Highland leading on so many projects, and also been involved as partners in other projects. So we'll just maybe get a brief introduction from yourself, Douglas, and then we can go into questions.
Great. Thank you very much, Chair. So before going into the report, I would just like to start by saying thank you to yourself. The support of the council is really important for High Life Highland, and we couldn't deliver the services in the way we would do without that support. We report, as you know, to the Education Committee, which you chair twice per year, and the support of you and your committee is very much appreciated, and it's always a pleasure to write these update reports for you. Also, Councillor Miller, thank you to him. He is on the board of High Life Highland. He's had a long association with us and was one of the councillors involved in the establishment of High Life Highland. So as a charity, we rely very much on our volunteer board of directors, and Drew's support at board level is invaluable. So thanks to you both. So now onto the report itself, and it's probably worth starting by saying that that we're really pleased to be delivering services in the Skye and Raasay area. We've got quite a range, and the services include archives, music tuition, in schools and sports development, and there's a great staff team there in the area who are very much part of their communities and contribute well to community life there. There is a really good hub facility in the secondary school campus in Portree, where we have a leisure centre, a library and an archive centre, and our active schools and music tuition staff and the volunteers associated with them run quite a range of programmes there between them. And we were reflecting recently that the facility predates High Life Highland, and it's been running now for about 15 years. And everywhere where we've introduced combined facilities like these, and I think Portree was among the first, if not the first, in the Highlands, we've seen significant increases in customer numbers because schools are very often at the heart of their communities. Combining facilities like those that we have here with schools creates vibrant community hubs where people not only go there to do their formal activities, but they create informal community meetings places which contribute to the health of communities, and the libraries are key parts of those facilities. You can see at the start of the report, we've tried to capture what we deliver to support Gaelic language and culture, and I'm always really pleased to see the extent of this, and I think it shows again the commitment of the staff team to their communities. And in that regard, programmed activity is really important, and I asked the team for an idea of what they run throughout a year, and I got a big list which covers all ages. So included in that list was Gaelic and English book bug for preschool children, Gaelic storytelling, Lego club, computer programming clubs, writing groups. Also really important is our Learn to Swim program, which is regarded by many as a light skill. And there's our summer and holiday programs, and we've got a whole range of activities, particularly in the summer for primary school age children, which is really important for communities. Our leisure subscription membership is really important for us. And through that, we reach about a quarter of the Highland population, and we have got 500 leisure subscriptions in Portree. So that equates to about 1,500 individuals and families that we have through the scheme. So quite a significant reach. And we also have a membership scheme for employers to help them to support the well-being of their staff and family members of those staff, and these equate to about a quarter of that membership. So we're very happy to speak with any employers in Skye who would be interested, and we have a member of staff that can contact them. It's probably worth making mention too of the mobile library service. It's really important for rural communities, and in other places we have had challenges with ageing vehicles and the manufacture of new ones as they're quite specialist. The good news is that we've been able to provide a consistent service in Skye, as that vehicle is one of our newer ones, and with the arrival of new vehicles early next year, we should help significantly sustain that service. And as part of the review that we've carried out on how we deliver mobile library services, we're about to provide a dedicated service for people who are housebound, making deliveries to their doorsteps. We hope to be able to start that when we take delivery of new mobile libraries, which we expect around about February next year is the estimated timescale. So overall, I think the services in this area are in good shape. We've got a committed team of staff who want to see the best for their area. Local people support services really well, and we're very grateful to them for doing that. The more that services are supported, the more that we're able to offer and to develop. So I'll just finish by saying thank you again. Thank you to this area committee. Your support and the council investment over the years has been key in getting services to where they are today. So with that, I'll hand back to yourself, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Douglas, thank you very much for that, and thank you very much for the report. And thank you for acknowledging Councillor Miller's great age. I think we were all aware of that. But fair play, Councillor Miller he was there at the start, and he's still hanging in there at the moment. So, okay, we'll go down members. We'll start off with Councillor Miller himself.
Yeah, still hanging in, but the grip's getting a bit loose nowadays. But so far, holding on. Yeah, thank you, Douglas, for that report. Some really great stats in there. music, sports development, etc. I think it's obviously good to see the figures involved in the Gaelic section as well, with sport and music. I just want to ask you a wee question, I suppose, if there's any connection with Sonas FC and Alba FA, because we were hoping to get a presentation at the Gaelic Committee a couple of weeks ago, and it was cancelled because of technology problems. So we're going to be hearing them again, I think, on the 12th of this month. But it'd be interesting to know if you've got any connection with them, and because I know they are had a wee conversation off outside the council meeting, and they are hoping to maybe expand eventually over to Skye and Raasay. So it would be good just to maybe, if you're working with them. I think we really, as a local councillor, we have to congratulate the staff for the service they are providing, and not only at the Fingal Centre, but I think throughout the whole ward. And I mean, the Archive Centre, I suppose, is one example of how they're doing a great job, a superb job, getting out there in the community, working in the communities and with the communities. An example, I think, was the day that was organised down at Callacan, commemorating the Skye Bridge opening, and of course the end of the ferry service. And I suppose the world recognition, the Angus Olga exhibition, was something that was really, it is a huge event, and I think it's happening in Inverness, I think, at the moment. I was moving to Inverness.
Yeah.
So yeah, you mentioned that in 6.5 anyway, but I think also in 8.3, the work that you're doing with the less fortunate, shall we say, and the elderly, which of course some of it, that it applies to some of us at the meeting today. So working in partnership with the NHS, and that might be an eye-opener for some that they're actually working in partnership with High Life Highland and the council. The thing that sort of slightly I don't know, amuses me is maybe not the right expression, but I'd just be interested in your in your library stats. 6.1, you're saying you've got a really encouraging 8% increase, and you've been around a long time as well, Douglas, though you don't look it perhaps, but so I just, there must be the 8% in that time scale a year. Do you have any idea of what the increase in the service users at the library, for example, a rough idea since it moved to the school? Because as you know, there was a lot of controversy at the time, and you have mentioned this morning that Portree was probably the first or one of the first to actually move the swimming pool library into the one sort of a community campus. So I just wondered if you had an idea of the overall increase, or doesn't have to be exact, but it'd just be for my own personal curiosity. It would be nice to know. But no, thank you for the presentation. It was good, and keep up the good work, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, Councillor Gillis.
Thank you so much for this report, and especially for the detail in it about the Gaelic and that impact in Gaelic that you're actually having to the revival of the language and maintaining the language locally. There's so many things in here. I absolutely love the archive. I would live there if I get the choice. It's been such an amazing service, and I have been at events where that information, that that preservation of material culture for the local area is so essential for us, and knowing where it is, and it is so well looked after, and then so well actually translated and then explained back to everybody and then discussed. It's just been an absolute delight. And one of the ones I was wondering about was that music tuition element. Obviously the castle have got their run rig room, so the importance of music tuition and skills in the area is continuing, as we're seeing with the likes of Nightwork and Valpos and all of these other other bands. So it was just to make sure that music tuition is continuing. Just how are you seeing those stats changing, adapting as time goes on?
Okay, Douglas, I'll maybe come in with a couple of final ones. And first of all, I think it is important to recognise the commitment of the staff who we've got in the area. And certainly, we know how strong things are in music, maybe particularly piping, the Archive Centre, and of course our active schools coordinators. So really is important that we recognise what these staff members offer. Okay, so looking at your stats and looking at the archive centre, you know, I think we would expect that more people digital than maybe in person. But I suppose the sports development one is the one that maybe offers a wee bit of concern. So we've gone down by 32%. Now, some of that I think may very well be related to the fact, or the unfortunate fact, that we have got the falling school rolls, unfortunately, across the majority of our schools in Skye and Raasay. But I suppose it's time to understand, is that the reason for that fall? Or maybe do we need to be looking at how we promote and advertise a lot of our sports development activities? Because I did notice even in the summer holidays, normally, you know, any sports activity events that were being put on by active schools, they were, you know, you had to almost book your place or you didn't get a place. But this year we had some cancelled because of a lack of interest. So I don't know if you've thought about what the reason for that. Okay, back to you, Douglas.
Great, thank you very much, Chair. So yeah, just to cover the questions in order, Councillor Miller, connections with other Gaelic organisations, and yes, we were scheduled to attend that Gaelic committee that I think was cancelled for technical reasons. So we will be back. Don't know the direct answer to your question. We have links and partnerships with lots, but I'll double check with Judy and Darren, who were taking that report to the committee, and just make sure. So I'll take that as an action through from that. And I think what you're saying about staff there, and what the archive staff doing, the Skye Bridge, the Angus Og. I mean, that Angus Og has been absolutely massive. It's something that the staff team have taken and run with, and I think it's had actually an impact well beyond Skye, well beyond the Highlands, in fact. So I think it's been really good to have been a part of that. And yep, thank you for what you've said about Fingal Centre NHS partnerships too. These NHS partnerships, I think, are really important for our customers. Without those NHS partnerships, we wouldn't necessarily have the skills or the ability, particularly to develop some of the condition-specific programmes and activities that we've done over the years. So having that expertise, I think, just gives us the confidence to be able to develop the right kind of programmes, so that we know that we're maximising benefit. And the library stats, I did look those up. So what we did is had a look at the year in the old library before it moved to the school. So the customer numbers there were 59,000, nearly 60,000 in round numbers. And then, so that was in the old building. Once the library was fully operational for a year in the school, the numbers went to 123,000. So, you know, doing that alone has just increased the use of that library, and we've been able to benefit so many more people through having that facility. And of course, you can see now in the report that it's 160,000. So I think that gives a picture of the importance of having the right facilities in the right place, and then the importance of actually taking those facilities, putting the programs. And what we've found over the years is that you need to actually actively program buildings to make sure that they're used. It makes them relevant. It helps, you know, that sense of community health, people interacting with each other, I think is really important. And on to Councillor Gillis's questions. Yep, the archive staff again. I mean, I'm actually based, our headquarters is in the Highland Archive Centre. I could listen to some of our archive staff all day. The information that they carry about in their heads is just fantastic, and the connections that they have with cultural organisations and with communities is really good. So I couldn't sing their praises enough. And music tuition. So I think music tuition generally in the Highlands is very strong. Councillor Finlayson will remember this. A few years ago, we invested in a pipe band drumming instructor, I did have I was really keen to do that at the time, and we did that with an element of external funding. We've managed to sustain that, so that's been a bit of a relief, and it's been it's been good to see that we've managed to keep that going, and we can see our young people not only participating week on week with the area group setup that we've got, and a lot of our staff are doing that in their own time as volunteers, and they're engaging other volunteers to support that. We see the area group set up so that young people are part of something, and I think it's really important for our young people to feel like they're part of something, and that they can do something which, when you hear them, is actually quite amazing. The quality of the music that they produce is really good. And then we've got the regional structures as well, and we've even had young people the summer just past going abroad. With a couple of groups participating overseas, Belgium. So it's really great to see that. And then Councillor Finlayson, yep, again, thank you for what you've said about our staff. And yep, the in-person and digital visits. Archives put a lot of their materials online. We've got the Ambala website, very popular Gaelic and English website there. Some of the digital content in terms of photos that we have are really fascinating. It's a source of research as well as a source of interest, and individual archive centres will do their own digital displays, if you like, where customers will access those digitally. And if you haven't seen this before, our Learn with Lorna programme it's one of those where member of staff will speak on a topic. She's absolutely great. She's the information that she has to her fingertips, it seems, is just fantastic. On sports development, it's not following school rules. We did have an issue of staff absence. It's brief. It's resolved now. We had neighbouring active school coordinator supporting, but that's the reason for that temporary dip. It's very much bounced back. We're seeing a recovery in the numbers as they stand currently. So I think we're okay there, Councillor Finlayson too. So I think that's them all. So thank you very much for having me at the committee.
Okay, Douglas, as always, thank you very much for attending, and thanks for that update. And very clearly, the High Life Highland is a very active part of what we're able to offer people of all ages in this area. And I think when you look at the list of activities that you are involved in, I think it really is impressive. So thank you very much for your time, Douglas, and no doubt we'll see you soon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you all.
Okay, members. Okay, moving swiftly on to Community Regeneration Fund. So we have got a funding request here. So we've got Marianne and Fiona, I think, online. So welcome, ladies, as always. And you just want to give us a brief summary, Marianne, of where we are. And then as members, we're asked to approve or otherwise the request made. So over to you, Marianne.
Thank you, Chair. Good morning, members. I will start by apologising because I noticed this morning I made a wee mistake on the committee report under point 6.1, where I give a bit of an introduction on the Islands programme, which members are familiar with. I noted 4 applications had been submitted to the Islands programme 25-26, but it's actually 5 applications. So I just wanted to make that clear so it doesn't cause any confusions. So yes, as you said, it is just one request we have to look at today. It is for the Young Carers New Build project. So it's the final design phase into the new build for the Young Carers project, which again, members will be familiar with as well. As I noted in the report, we have a proposal gone to the Islands programme for an award, or hopefully an award of £70,000. We're waiting official announcement. And the request for members today is match funding for the total project costs. The project costs are design costs, so it includes quantity surveyor costs, architect fees, and a lot of technical engineers, as is the case for the final design phase of a new build. Total cost are £129,700. There is an outstanding match funding applications to the Isle of Skye Renewables. There's £70,000 from the Islands programme, hopefully, and a request to CRF for £50,000. So I'll leave it with members to discuss, and if you have any questions, please let me know.
Okay, thank you. I think we all really do understand the value of young carers to young people and families in our area. And certainly from my perspective, if we are able to secure the 70,000 from the Islands programme, I think we would all be keen to support an award from CRF. Members, can I ask if we're all in agreement that should the other award come through from the Islands programme, that we would be willing to support with 50k from our own CRF?
Agree?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, simple there, Marianne, and you can keep us updated of when you get notification from the Islands programme, but members are all happy to support the application.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, members, moving on to the next paper, which is about short-term let control areas, and this was agreed at council sometime this year. Any decision whether we move to even a consultation about short-term let control area needs to come through the area committees. So I'm delighted to welcome Maeve to our committee today, and thank you for your very detailed report, Maeve. So I'll hand over to you to introduce the paper, then we'll go to members, and then we'll come to some kind of decision. Thank you.
Thank you. I see Councillor Stewart, you've got your hand raised. Do you want to speak before I present the paper?
No, I'm happy to wait my turn. Thank you.
Okay, perfect. Great. So yes, I'll present the paper, and I think for the public record, it's beneficial to clarify the scope of a short-term let control area, and to also remind members of the public that the council has one in force at the present time in Ward 20 in Badenoch and Strathspey. So there are many different types of short-term lets, and a short-term let control area is quite specific in the short-term lets that it can actually control. So it basically ensures that all changes of use from dwelling houses to short-term lets are brought within the scope of the planning system, which means that planning permission would be required. It would not and should not be interpreted as though as a ban. So planning applications are received for conversions to short-term let within our existing short-term let control area, and we determine those applications in accordance with the council's existing planning policies, and also in accordance with National Planning Framework 4. So a short-term let control area does not apply to existing properties where no material change of use had occurred at the time of establishment. It doesn't also apply to second homes, which are not classed as short-term lets. They're distinctly separate. There's a small number of instances where there's some overlap, but it also doesn't control guest houses, B&Bs, annexes and pods, and other forms of purpose-built tourism accommodation, because these short-term lets would require planning permission anyway, because they're newly built structures. So the policy that we currently use in Ward 20 is shown here. So you can see there are some criteria where we support the conversions of dwelling houses into short-term lets if there's evidence to suggest that this was actually a long-term empty dwelling house and is therefore being brought back into an active use, or similarly where it's located above commercial units within town and village centres. So these are some of the instances where in our existing policy we use those criteria to support the conversions, and just therefore to be clear that this is not interpreted as a ban. So the process of designating any further short-term let control areas requires us to follow a statutory process defined in regulations. We have to notify and consult with the public and with the communities within the affected area within that designation. We then have to submit this proposal to Scottish ministers and obtain their approval. And if we get their approval, we then have to undertake a final publication to notify that this would be coming into force. So the council's own internal process was agreed in September at full council, which would be initially the area committees to decide on whether to progress with the introduction covering all or part of the area. And then the subsequent stages are all taken by E&I. So this would be that E&I would take the decision to formally commence the process with the consultation, that E&I would take the decision to continue the process, in other words, to submit to Scottish ministers. And after Scottish ministers decide to offer any approvals, the final decision to then designate would be again taken by E&I. So at the present committee this morning, we are at that initial stage. It's for area committees to decide on whether there is a justification and whether to progress with this introduction covering the Skye and Raasay area. So looking then at more of the detail within the report as to what officers have assessed so far, when we look at the Highland Housing Need and Demand Assessment, which is ongoing, there's a lot of data sets provided to a local authority by Scottish Government in order to actually undertake a housing need and demand assessment. One of those is a very detailed data set on property sales transactions. And we also then compare this with the council's existing stock profile. When we look at Skye, in particular, Skye and Raasay is the name of the housing market area. We can see that it's not a very well contained housing market area. So in contrast with Highland being 70% contained, which means 71% of property sales in Highland were purchased by people in Highland. The equivalent for Skye itself, internal self-containment is 41, and we're seeing 55% of property sales within this housing market area completed by those out with the Highlands entirely. So they are out with the Highlands, sometimes out with Scotland, and sometimes further afield than that. All in all, it comes to 55% of sales. We see very high rates of second homes and short-term lets. So we have twice as many second homes as a percentage of dwellings than Highland, and we have 18% or 3 times as many short-term lets than Highland. So we're seeing quite a low containment within the housing market, and a substantial share of stock which is ineffective and is not available for people to permanently live in within Skye and Raasay. How this plays out then when we specifically look at your housing market specifically is that the average house prices are higher than Highlands. The market entry house prices, which are what properties are initially put on the market at, are again higher than Highlands, and the income therefore to afford those market entry and average household prices is higher than Highland, and that's household income, by the way, not personal income. So we see that this results in a higher percentage of those who cannot afford relative to Highland as well. When we look at the profile of short-term lets within the ward, we can see that we're dealing with a total of over 1,500 short-term lets in Skye. But the majority of them are potential dwelling STLs, so they have been converted from previous dwellings, but there is also a very substantial proportion of 370 unconventional accommodation short-term lets, which are again of the nature that would require planning permission anyway, regardless of a short-term let control area, because they almost always are newly erected structures that require planning permission. When we look at new build housing completions, and look at specifically properties that were applied for through the planning process as houses, were completed and received their building warrant completion certificates, and then subsequently have arose on the short-term let licence register. We do see variable percentages by year, but usually more than 12% per year, and an average of basically 15% over the last 5 years of new build houses that have now become licensed short-term lets. The figures within the end of the report should provide the public and with members of some of the key indications of what this data has told us as we've analysed short-term let prevalence across the Highlands. So the majority of short-term lets in Skye are detached dwellings in rural settings. There is a small proportion of Skye where the dominant short-term let type is actually unconventional accommodation, where the kind of cumulative pods and chalets actually outnumber the detached dwellings. But in the majority of instances, we are looking at detached dwellings being the majority. When we look at the adjusted short-term let rate, which is basically looking at all the all the potential dwellings that could be used as short-term lets as a share of total dwellings, we see that all of the islands, with only one data zone being the exception, falls not only higher than Highlands average, but actually higher than a sort of statistically normal range. So basically more than what we would expect within.
Reeve, could I
NED.
maybe come in? Did you have you think you've got a presentation showing?
Sorry, is this not showing?
No.
Oh, apologies. I should have checked that that was visible. I think what I can do
Yeah,
then
it
is
is now. Thank you.
okay. So apologies. I can perhaps recap then what these figures have been showing in the report. Apologies, I thought that was visible to members. So yes, as you can see in figure 1, I believe it's the majority of short-term lets within Skye and Raasay are, as I said, detached dwellings in a rural context. And then you can see for the area that is majority unconventional accommodation. When we look then at the adjusted short-term let rate, you can see that with only one data zone being the exception, the majority are above the Highland average and are actually higher than the Highland average. They're beyond what we would expect within a normal data set range. So they're exceeding quite a high threshold. And some within the North End are sort of extreme outliers within Highland as well. When we see areas of growth to see where are and are these necessarily the same places that they're already high, we can see that the middle data zones tend to be increasing faster than the Highland average, but of course the other remaining parts are also increasing, but they're increasing slower than the Highland average. And then when we look at that combined, when we see where is high and where is high and continuing to grow, we can see overlap here where there's particular areas that are already high and they are continuing to grow, and in fact have been continuing to grow faster than the Highland average for 2 consecutive years. I think for the benefit of members, it may be helpful to recap some of those tables within the presentation, which I mistakenly thought you were seeing at the same time as I was looking at it. So just for clarity then on the public record, this is the table showing the percentage of new build housing completions that have been transferred to short-term let use and become licensed short-term lets. This is the profile of short-term lets within Ward 10. So we're seeing that, as I've stated previously, the majority are potential dwelling short-term lets. And this was the table showing the housing market indicators. Now, all of this is contained within the report, so hopefully that's clear. But essentially what we're seeing is, as stated, Skye and Raasay, as a result of the higher average house prices and market entry house prices, has a greater percentage of those who cannot afford relative to Highland as a whole. So moving on through the figures, we've also considered registered local place plans in the preparation of this report. So there is currently one registered local place plan within the Skye and Raasay area for Broadford and Strath. So this has mentioned the rise in tourism, and it's a strong tourist economy in Skye, in fact of the whole of Skye. But the LPP has raised this as being a concern with, although it's clearly appreciated from visitor spend within the local economy, there has been instances of pressure on housing stock and supply of sites for the demand from visitor accommodation. And the Broadford and Strath local place plan can be reviewed for that expression of community concern on the issue. Then we've also looked at the area place plan, the Skye and Raasay Future, which was adopted in August 2021, which identifies that housing issues are exacerbated by a strong tourism sector and a demand for short-term let accommodation. Now, we do also have notification of further local place plans that are being produced by other communities within the area. So one that has been presented to us but has not yet been formally registered includes the Slate place plan, which mentions that housing is a critical priority and an emphasis on balancing tourism accommodation with residential needs. We have also received notification from UIG of their intent to prepare an LPP, but we have not yet seen any draft of this. So the recommendations that are in front of members today are that, on balance, the evidence would suggest that there is justification for considering a short-term let control area in Skye and Raasay, owing to high rates of short-term lets within the area and a continued likelihood that this can grow, given that housing completions are being transferred to short-term lets at a far higher rate than we're seeing across Highland as a whole. Progressing with the further consideration of a short-term let control area would, if formally announced by E&I, that's Economy and Infrastructure Committee, trigger a formal consultation with the communities within that affected designation. It would enable us as officers to have a greater sense of community sentiment on the issue. It would give communities a say and enable us to be informed by those community priorities and aspirations. And while there's undoubtedly a strong tourist economy in the area that we would wish to support, further purpose-built tourism accommodation can be provided and also avail of those economic benefits without having to incur a loss of housing supply. And in an area that's really characterised by little volume house builder activity, we would suggest that it would be a reasonable step to take a short-term let control area within the Skye and Raasay area. And on that basis, I'm happy to conclude, and apologies for the delay in the presentation coming through on the screens.
Okay, Maeve, thank you very much indeed. I think that was, I think the report and your presentation, I think it makes very, very stark reading. So I'll go to Councillor Stewart first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thanks for the report. I think, housing pressures on Skye, are real. We all recognise that, but I don't think that the short-term let control areas are the right tool to fix this. I think we've got to base our decisions more on, what we can do as an authority rather than a convenient scapegoat of legitimate businesses. Because having a look at this, I think the evidence is actually quite clear that this isn't the way to go. Tourism, as has been mentioned, is absolutely essential to the well-being of Skye. We've got over 800,000 visitors a year, and they bring in excess of £220 million in spending. If you look at that, how it translates into our communities, it's almost 3,000 local jobs depend on tourism, which is nearly half of our working age population. So, I don't think tourism can be seen as an optional extra for our island, given that half of our population earn a living off of it. And I think that short-term lets are vital to part of that success. It's not only accommodation for visitors, but like short-term workers, contractors who keep a lot of our businesses and economies functioning. So I think short-term lets aren't the source of our housing problem, but they're an essential part of our tourism infrastructure. And I really don't think that undermining them in this way will reverse decades of policy failure of housing delivery, because I think that's what the core issue is here. So, I'm disappointed to see the short-term let thing coming forward, because I think legitimate and local businesses are completely being used as scapegoats here, because it's easier to blame them than confront some of the real issues that we've got with housing. And it's just a chronic shortage of affordable housing caused by our failure to build. I don't think it's fair to put this on to tourism, because this council itself, we admit that it's been building only half of the homes it requires when we declared the housing challenge. So we see from the stats in this report on Skye, we've averaged 77 new homes a year over 5 years, which is nowhere near what we need, and we all know that. Now, I do have a question I'd like to pick up on, and it's of the 60 new homes that have now been used as short-term lets, do we know how many of those were registered straight away as secondary lets, and how many were registered as businesses from day one? Because, I think, I'm not sure that these homes would have been built if they weren't going to be for the letting purpose. Like, do we know if these had ever been used as primary residences? And I've got another wee bit to go with this. So, I think as well with this, like, so we've got the picture of it, but we can't ignore that, we've got a culture here in Highland of, trying to be anti-development. I've been out speaking to people, and my inbox is filling up. I'm sure many of you are the same. And, you know, I'm hearing time and again that houses are being recommended to be refused because the windows are the wrong size or the colour of the door wasn't what would have been like. And I think, you know, we've got to look at what we can do to, you know, support people building houses in our communities, because, you know, even looking at this report, it claims that there's 1,558 short-term lets. But if you look at this in a bit more detail from the publicly available register, there's 370 are pods and chalets and 292 are home shares. So that's somebody's primary home, but the person lives there, so it's not prejudicial to the housing supply. So if you drill that down even further, there's only 896 that are actual secondary lets. So the scale of this problem, I think, it has been overinflated, exaggerated almost in the region of 40%. And I think, to be honest, Chair, you've just got to look at what's happened elsewhere. You know, in Edinburgh, the control zones resulted in 71% refusal rate, and there's been very little, in fact, no improvement in housing outcomes. So I think what we really risk doing here is we're going to harm the economy and we're not going to solve the problem. So I don't think that Skye and Raasay will fix the housing shortage by imposing new restrictions on the very businesses that keep our economy going. And I think what we need is to work better as a Highland Council and with Scottish Government to foster a culture where development is welcome. I don't think restricting enterprise is the way to go. We need to, you know, accelerate house building, tackle empty homes. I don't think punishing the self-catering sector for the failing of public policy is a good idea at all. You know, I don't think we need to drown legitimate businesses in more regulation. So I'll move an amendment that we do not continue with this. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Stewart. Councillor Gillis. You're on mute, Chrissy.
Where to start? Housing was one of the main things that was raised with me when I was canvassing at the beginning of the year. And the statistics that are shown in this report highlight what is being said to myself and a lot of other people on the ground and in the council. It also highlights the fact that communities themselves have been taking on housing projects, which has taken a lot of community hours and a lot of community dedication and, you know, millions of pounds worth of investment to try and tackle the problems within housing. Now, what's being suggested here, and Maeve, if you can correct me if I'm wrong, this is not retrospective. So the businesses, the establishments that we have already got will not be impacted by this. This is looking forward and looking at other businesses and other houses that are going to be coming into the short-term let market. Now, one of the key statistics within the report that you shared with us is the number of people who cannot afford market entry house price, which was at 50%. Now, I have worked in hospitality in Skye and Raasay, and I've worked in hospitality across Scotland, and to get a wage of £42,000 a year, you have got to be quite high up the food chain within hospitality. So my impression is a lot of the people working in hospitality are not actually going to be the ones who will be able to afford to buy a house, which is part of the reason we are trying to tackle the housing shortage. And it's not just a shortage, it's an access shortage. So there are plenty of houses, and there are a few being built every year, but it's access to them. Now, the sales to out with the area, that statistic is really stark and does need to be commented on. Our local young people who want to stay here, who want to have children, to build a house, to buy a house, to work and live in the area, are not getting the opportunity. Now, this is one simple tool, and it will go out for community consultation. This is the whole point of us talking about this, is so that we can get the community's input in this, not just the 4 councillors sitting here in this committee. And I really welcome the engagement that will come from this if we do actually proceed with it.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Miller.
Yeah, thanks very much, and thank you, Maeve, for the presentation and for the report, because I think, to be honest, the statistics in there are quite alarming, to be honest. Now, as Councillor Gillis said as well, I understand obviously that the existing STLs are exempt. So my question in a moment or two will be, if you can answer it later on anyway, would be that if such properties were, for example, sold, would they, if the Skye and Raasay was a control area, would then the property then need to a planning permission if they were the new owners were going to continue with the short-term let? But as I said, I think, you know, and Councillor Gillis has just mentioned it, the statistic and the tables where you're looking at the house prices and the amount of money you need to earn to be in any chance of affording a home purchase is out with the reach of most people. And that 50% is quite alarming. I don't understand where Councillor Stewart's coming from, to be honest. We're asking to go out to consultation, and if, as with other consultations, if we are told by the people, the residents of Skye and Raasay, that they are not happy with this, then I think there would be time for an amendment. So I would certainly happy to advance this process, and I would support the recommendations in front of us this afternoon. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I'll maybe just come in. So I thank you right at the beginning for for clarifying what you were saying. This is about a specific area. It's not banning short-term lets, and it's not being applied retrospectively to places that are already short-term lets. But I think what we're getting from this report is a suggestion that Skye and Raasay houses are clearly less affordable, and we have higher rates of STLs and second homes than Highland as a whole. And I think when you look at the stats, quite substantially so. And I think in terms of that being the case for dwellings being based, all the dwellings we've got right across Skye and Raasay, and particularly the new builds, I think despite what Councillor Stewart said in the number of not building enough houses, I think the percentage is still quite startling. And I think if we look again at that point, new completions, 15.5% are being directly used as short-term lets, when the rest of Highland is 5%. So I think it's really important that I think we're at a stage here where we should be asking the people of Skye and Raasay what their thoughts are, because I know while Councillor Stewart has a lot of emails coming in, the majority of my emails, unfortunately, are about people who can't afford to get on the housing list and who basically can't even get access to the housing list because of a lot of the information in this report. So I think we should at least consider the steps that are being recommended. And in terms of the recommendation in the report, I should have removed the recommendations earlier on, but I see Rudy's put in an amendment. So I will move the recommendations in the report. And these are that we agree that Skye and Raasay Area Committee seeks to progress with the process of considering the introduction of a short-term let control area covering all or part of the Skye and Raasay area. And I think it should be all, to be quite honest, and agree that progressing with consideration of our short-term let control area enables communities within the area to participate in that consultation. And I think that's really key. I think, as Councillor Muller has said, we are going out to consult with the people across the ward. And clearly we would listen to whatever that feedback is. And I think that's the important thing. We need to hear the voice of the people, because we do know that housing is a huge issue for us. And I think we need to look at all avenues of making housing more affordable and more accessible for residents and young people in our area. So Alistair, will go to you. So I'm moving the recommendations in the report. And if you want to read out Councillor Stewart's amendment, we can then go to a vote.
Just before you do you want me to come in on some of these questions?
Oh, yeah, sorry, maybe want to come back. Sorry, apologies.
Yeah, that's fine. Just on the income, just a point of clarification, the income required to afford rows within the table, that refers to household income, not personal income. So that might be a helpful clarification just for note. So yeah, that particularly those rows on the income required for market entry house price and for average house price, that is definitely referring to household income and not personal income. Just a point on the housing completions, and Councillor Stewart, your question on whether this was actually including purpose-built holiday homes. It's not. We joined the housing land audit to the short-term let licence register. A property that was applied for through planning as a purpose-built holiday home would not appear on the housing land audit. So I can categorically say they are excluded from that, and those housing completions were applied for through the planning process as houses, because otherwise they would not have been on the housing land audit. So that's a technical point. The question from Councillor Miller on the new process. So, and this ties into what Councillor Gillis asked as well about not applying retrospectively. So, for existing short-term lets within Skye and Raasay, there is no short-term let control area currently in place in Skye and Raasay. So there's no requirement for those existing short-term lets to have planning permission in place unless a material change of use has occurred. This is where it gets slightly more complex. So in instances where you have, for example, flats with communal stairwells, typically this means even outside of a short-term let control area, planning permission is usually required because this is deemed a material change of use, whereas the majority of short-term lets that we see in Skye and Raasay are not flats with communal stair entrances. So this is where we start to get into quite a different reality to what you're seeing in Edinburgh, and that's really important to note the difference here. So for existing short-term lets, they also need to have a license in place, and when they go to renew their license, at the present time, they have a license which was granted to them without planning permission because they didn't need it out with a short-term let control area. When they go to renew, there is potentially then an opportunity where a short-term let control area would be in force. And under licensing legislation, there would be a requirement to demonstrate that they had planning. However, the view taken by the council that we've used in Badenoch and Strathspey is if you can demonstrate that you were operating as a short-term let before the short-term let control area came into force, then what you do is apply for a certificate of lawful use, which gives a letter of comfort to the operator that this was in operation as a short-term let before the short-term let control area came into force. However, if an operator submits an application for a certificate of lawful use at the present time in Skye and Raasay, the council would not actually be able to determine it because there's no short-term let control area in force. So there's a sort of a strange delay here where the ultimate mechanism for operators to demonstrate that they've already been operating as an existing short-term let operator is to apply for a certificate of lawful use. But the council cannot determine those at this time until a control area comes into force. Once they have that certificate of lawful use, then that can feed in directly to their licensing renewals. So I appreciate it's two different pieces of legislation which interplay with one another. I hope I've demonstrated or explained it slightly clearer as to why we don't consider that it applies retrospectively, and because of the approach that we've taken in Badenoch and Strathspey, which offers significant opportunity, therefore, for the existing providers to continue operating under the provisions that we've taken.
Okay, Rudy, back to you because you've got an amendment in, so you can come back in with questions and really just to speak to your amendment.
No, thank you, Chair. It's just follow up on that point. It's my understanding that certificate of lawful use only comes into force if the premise has been operating for 10 years or more. So I'd just like some clarity on that. It's also my understanding in the Badenoch and Strathspey area that it's only for properties that have less than 4 bedrooms. So I'm just a bit concerned about that because obviously I appreciate what you're saying, but this does, come into a lot of people in our community, and it's a big concern to many of our people that operate in this sector. I also just think as well, like, I appreciate the retrospective element of it, but I think if you look at Edinburgh, like they did refuse 71% when they came, and when it comes up for renewal for the licensing, if for whatever reason they've not been operating for 10 years or cannot evidence that, then there will be a lot of people who will be unable to continue to run their business and supplement their income. So I really won't go back to the point that I made earlier, Chair. I don't think that someone, you know, running a bed and breakfast in their granny's own croft house is indeed the source of the housing problem. But I do think that we should do more to try and facilitate house building here in the island.
Okay, thanks, Rudy. Amy,
Yeah.
have you got a reply for Rudy?
Just for the 10-year point of view, I cannot comment on the interpretation that the City of Edinburgh Council are taking. The Highland Council's interpretation that we've used in Badenoch and Strathspey is that we don't require 10 years. We require them to demonstrate that the short-term let was in operation before the short-term let control area came into force. There wasn't a legislative basis for a short-term let control area 10 years ago. So you know, we certainly wouldn't have a basis on which to say whether or not this was happening for the previous 10 years. It would be very challenging for us to assess whether that was the case. So I think the position we've taken is more reasonable. We have sort of suggested that if you've been clearly operating before the short-term let control area came into force and your short-term let does not constitute a material change of use, i.e. it's not a flat within a communal staircase or entrance building. And yes, correctly, you've mentioned no fewer than 4 bedrooms, which means basically 5 or more. Those conversions of those properties into short-term lets are also considered material change of use. So yes, they would require planning permission. If there's properties that are of that size or self-contained flats with a communal stairwell, then they, in most instances, but we can't, until we see the specifics of a planning application, it would be potentially likely that they would require planning permission, but the majority of instances would fall within the certificate of lawful use.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, so before we go to the vote, I think it's important to remember what the recommendations are saying. And it says to consider. We're not saying we're going to introduce a short-term let control area, but what we're doing is we're going to move forward the process of consulting with the communities to decide whether that's something that we should be moving forward. So I think given the statistics in this paper, I think it's only right that we do that, because I think it's fair to say probably the Skye and Raasay area, where the percentages are highest compared to all the other, probably papers that you've written for other area committees. I mean, we're probably, if this was a Premier League, we would be top of that Premier League.
Yes, yeah. It is the highest. It's the area that's showing, and particularly the percentage of sales completed to those out with the Highlands. That's obviously a Skye area. It is over 50. It's 55% of the whole Skye area, but there are individual data zones within that where it's in essence it's basically higher than that again. So out of the data zones that you have, 9 of them are where the property sales are to those outside Highland are exceeding 50%. In some individual data zones, it's higher again. So we're certainly seeing 9 out of the sort of 17 where that's flagging up across the area committee, which is one of the suggested indicators within the short-term let circular that the Scottish Government has written for us as to what are the potential indicators that we need to be looking at in considering whether there are systemic issues across an area. So we've specifically looked at this data for this reason, because it's been advised to do so by the Scottish Government's planning circular.
Okay, Alistair, we'll move to you. I'm recommending that we agree the recommendations in the report, and Rudy's got an amendment in that you can also make available.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just to check, can I ask your motion, Chair? Do you have a seconder?
Yeah, I'll second that.
Yeah, Councillor Miller.
Councillor Miller, okay, and Councillor Stewart, do you have your amendment? Do you have a seconder for that?
Probably not, Alistair. So if you can record my dissent against this decision, that would be cracking. Thank you.
So members, you have a motion by Councillor Finlayson, seconded by Councillor Miller, and that's to approve the recommendations in the report. Given there's no amendment, that would be the finding of the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And thank you very much, Meath, for your report. I think it was very detailed, and you certainly clarified, I think, all the points that members had. So we appreciate that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank
members.
you, members.
Okay, members, moving on to item 8, Housing Performance Report. And I think we've got Margaret Ross with us. Are you there, Margaret?
I am here. Yeah, a bit slow in the buttons, but I am here.
Hi, Margaret. We haven't seen you for a while, so nice to see you again.
And you, thank you for having me.
Okay, so you just give us a brief summary of the report, Margaret, and then we can pick up some questions.
Yep, I will do it. So, good afternoon. It's good to see you all. I'm pleased to present to you today the Housing Performance Report for the period 1st of April to the 30th of September 2025. As you know, this report provides key performance information which is largely based on the reporting framework recommended by the regulator, with the exception of the data around homelessness, which are agreed indicators for reporting to local committees, and I hope you find this data interesting and useful. I'd like to draw your attention to some key parts of the report. Section 6 covers all aspects of our performance and rent arrears. Quarter 2 slightly up in quarter 1, but the performance remains strong. The arrears across this area constitute 4.68% of the annual rent due, and that figure is substantially less than the Highland-wide figure, which is over 6%. We can see that the majority of the arrears are less than £500. From the beginning of quarter 1, the team served 14 notices of proceedings, but that resulted in only 3 court actions and thankfully no evictions. So that really demonstrates the commitment of the team to sustain tenancies, which is really what we're all about these days, and signpost vulnerable households to appropriate support. Section 7 takes us to antisocial behaviour complaints. Thankfully, complaints are very low. We've currently got 1 open case, and the odd case which remains open longer than normal maybe are certainly more complex and require multi-agency intervention sometimes. Going on to section 8, some data around homelessness for you. At quarter 2, we had received 24 homeless presentations, and as you'll see from the graph at 8.4, the number of presentations is steady. Table 8 shows that the majority of people presenting as homeless across this area have a 1-bed need. And finally, we look at some data around allocations, and we can see that since quarter 1, we have allocated 10 properties, of which 6 have been tenanted by homeless households. That's what we would expect, as those are the households with the greatest housing need. So that's a run through of the paper for you, and I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you might have.
Okay, thank you. Right. Yeah, thank you very much. Rudy, you're first.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think there's a lot of good news in this report, and it's good to see the rent arrears are coming down. However, it's probably going to come as a surprise to nobody that I'm going to mention this again with the housing allocations. I really think that we need to do more to look towards moving towards a local lettings initiative to make sure that local families and local key workers, more importantly, can get houses within our community. I'm glad that you mentioned the antisocial behaviour. I was going to pick up on that. I appreciate there are sometimes quite complex issues surrounding some of these cases, but I think just from watching the Highland Cops or Scott Squad or whatever it's called, I've probably seen more than one case of antisocial behaviour in our properties. So I'm just wondering how proactive the team are with, I don't want to say looking for issues, but doing that sort of community engagement, stuff with gardens and stuff as well. That's something that I'm hearing quite a bit. Now, my next point's on the rent arrears itself. Actually, it'd be really helpful to know how many months some of these cases are, because I appreciate that while the value may be low, if like the majority of your rent, 50%, 75% is being covered by universal credit or another benefit that you get paid direct to the local authority. It may in some cases constitute quite a prolonged period of time that you've not been engaging with the council, not paying the rent. And the reason I bring this up is that I don't think from a point of fairness that people who do pay their way, people that do religiously make those choices to pay their rent, even when they perhaps can't afford it, or they can't afford their energy or food shop. So I think we do need to get better at tackling this, and it would be helpful to know how long some of these cases had been going on for. Now, I completely agree that early intervention is the best policy, and we should be doing more, but I would welcome your thoughts on the points that I've made. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Stewart. Have we got any other? I'm not seeing any other hands. Margaret, maybe I'll just come in. So again, looking at the rent arrears, we see that they've gone up a little bit from Q1 to Q2. But that's still better than we've had in previous years. And the number of homeless presentations, I'm having a quick look at that. And I suppose I see that was sort of plateaued round about between 22 and 24 now for probably over a year. And I suppose the question is, even though we're sitting at that sort of stable number, what are the possibilities of getting these numbers down? And I suppose, is the 22 and 24, 25 Q1 and the 24, is it the same people, or have they been replaced by others in as much as we've managed to house some, and then it's just new people coming onto the thing? And I think the point that Rudy made about the housing allocations policy, now my understanding is that, I think you're on Housing and Property, Rudy. I think Housing and Property agreed to a review of the housing allocations policy, and I think it's important to say that we certainly in this area are committed to that local element being included. Councillor Miller.
Right, sorry, I was a wee bit late putting my hand up there. I was just going to see what Margaret was going to say. Anyway, thank you for the report, Margaret. Yeah, I think we've all, some of us longer than others, have had a concern about the allocations policy, to be honest, but and hopefully welcome the review. But of course, I suppose, well, my question, I'm going to come to in a minute or two, but my question would be for Margaret really is, given that the huge waiting list that we have, and as well as the homeless numbers, and that's always contentious, isn't it, about people who all of a sudden appear in our community, and you wonder why. And we know that the complexity of homeless situation and how people have to be home. I just wondered on the numbers, I think it's in your report, but maybe you could clarify the number of people who are being given tenancies from the homeless situation, and many of them are actually residents of Ward 10. But the question, I suppose, really is, how many houses have the council planned to build over the next 5 years? Because if my memory serves me right as well, the council haven't built very many properties on Skye in the last 20 years, really. We're relying very much on the housing association to build the houses, and we all know now that they got planning in principle for 240 houses. So there's about 300 houses to be built in Portree itself over the next, well, how long it takes them to build these houses. But the council don't seem to be in, sadly, I'm of the age now that I do remember when we offered the tenants a chance of leaving the council and going to sort of like a private organisation, association. The tenants at the time throughout the whole of the Highlands voted to stay with the council because they were the best landlords. But we don't seem to be building houses on Skye, and that's a concern, I think, for many people. I'm not saying that the housing association are not good landlords, by the way. I'm just going back in history. The people in the Highlands said that the council were a fantastic landlord, great landlord, and we don't see the council building houses on Skye. So that's my sort of concern about this report, about the number of homeless people. And Councillor Finlayson and Councillor Stewart have both mentioned this, looking at how do we change the allocation policy, make it maybe a more local allocation policy. Can we do that? Because over the many years I've been here, the complaints that I do get now and again from people is that locals seem to be forgotten because we never can get enough points to be up on the allocations model. So that's really my sort of little mini rant at the moment, and I hope that maybe you can get a question in there for me, Margaret, you could answer.
Okay. I think Margaret will probably remind us that the council and all the Skye Housing Association, basically they meet weekly, and they've got there's a joint allocation policy. But I'll let the expert give you the answer fully. I'll go to Chrissy first.
Hi, Margaret. Thank you so much for this report. I'm just going to pick up on 8.5, following on from what Councillor Miller was just talking about, and the number of homeless presentations from relationship breakdowns and private rented or tied tenancies coming to an end. What sort of percentage of the presentations that we have in the statistics here are actually from that, just to try and understand how many are living and working in the area already that we are seeing, and how that's linking into what is being seen in these statistics. We were involved in 2016, Raasay did a housing survey to look at need in the local area, and that's what's led to the significant community-led housing developments here on Raasay. But one of the most significant points was a few years ago, one of the local lassies who lives and works here actually applied for housing and was told that she would be better moving to Portree or Broadford because there was no chance of getting anything on Raasay. Now, I don't know if Councillor Miller remembers this research that was done in 1996, where they went to all of the communities to ask what was going wrong and how do we fix it all. And one of my favourite statistics from that was the fact that Raasay apparently needed 50 houses to be built in the next 15 years. Sadly, they were not built. There have been some built with the Housing Association and just looking at that policy so that we could look at key workers. So I really do welcome the fact that we are getting that review from the Housing Committee. So I'm looking forward to hearing about that. But yeah, just if we could get that information from that fluctuation from local residents already, that would be great.
Okay, Margaret, I think you've got a few questions there.
I have. I hope I can read my notes. So, Councillor Stewart, we are reviewing the allocations policy, and you will hear in due course how that's going. And I'm sure there'll be consultation and members' opinions will be taken into consideration. We are also developing a key worker policy. There is some key worker funding from Scottish Government available as well. And really that brings me on to an answer to several of your questions. What you should maybe think to do is to ask Helen Cameron, the Housing Development Manager, to attend the ward business meeting, because Helen will know about all planned developments in Skye and Raasay. I simply don't have that information. I was at the development meeting this morning, it was fine, but you'll know all this already, 250 houses in Portree, in partnership, as you say, Councillor Miller, with other organisations, and I didn't get a sense this morning of any numbers available for how many that might be attributed to Highland Council. And then the McKinnon Memorial Hospital in Broadford. The development team, I believe, are ready to start consultation on what the public would like to see done with that site. So, I'll not steal Helen's thunder. You would be much better speaking to Helen, and I'm sure she'll be happy to attend a ward business meeting.
Just to say, Margaret, Helen is coming to an area business meeting on the 15th of December. And I think we also mentioned there's 16 units in Dunvegan as well that are currently we're going to be moving forward. Yeah,
her team will be able to give you a spot-on update on where we are. How many months have some of these cases been in arrears? I think we'll pull together some kind of report for you and also attend an area business meeting if that would be helpful, because that report that's in front of us today doesn't give us that kind of detail. but they will be for many months, Councillor Stewart, because those ones under £500 are almost exclusively, not totally, but largely due to Universal Credit paying 5 weekly in arrears. Simple as that. Now the team have to work and encourage people to pay a wee bit extra every week, but that's not easy for people that are on very limited incomes. And with the hope that over a 1 or 2 year period, they would start to get ahead of themselves a bit. The lease is quite clear that rent should be paid in advance. However, there are, Universal Credit is very much a factor here in how it's paid. But we can certainly look to see what the average time somebody's in arrears for these ones under £500. Councillor Finlayson, stable number of presentations. They are replaced by others. Those are not the same names. Those are new names. There are continual presentations of homeless presentations in Skye and Raasay. Councillor Miller, we could again attend an area business meeting and give you some breakdown, all of you, on the circumstances of those presentations, anonymised obviously. It will be no different from when we did that for you before, but we'd be happy to attend. The majority of them, Councillor Finlayson, will have need to reside. I'm almost sure of that, which means they have a local connection to the area. But you have to set that in the, we've already said there's going to be a review of the allocations policy, but I'm happy to present those figures to you. What else have I got here? I'm delighted to know that we're considered to be a good landlord, I have to say. We work very, very hard at being a good landlord. And we had a very positive report from the Scottish Housing Regulator last week on performance across all areas of our business, and I'm very proud to be part of the service, actually. Councillor Gillis, we can also include in a report any of these stats that you want, if they're not included today. Does that answer everybody's queries?
Yep, I think it does. And as I say, we've got Helen coming along on the 15th. So, Willie, it might be that we also get Margaret along at the same time. So we've got a formidable, even more formidable team, Margaret and Helen together. So I'm sure that can be arranged. Margaret, as always, thank you very much for attending, and we'll possibly see you on the 15th. If not, we'll see you at another time.
Lovely. Thank you for your time. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Okay, members, we're moving on to item 9, the car park finance update. And then I'm not sure, I'm seeing Shane. Shane, I don't know if Ross is with us, or is just Shane today. Well, Ross and Shane are both with us. Not seeing you yet, guys. Okay, there we go. Okay, morning, Ross, I'm seeing you. Morning, Shane, seeing you. Okay, guys, thank you very much indeed. And as I say, welcome to the area committee. I suppose I need to start off with saying that while I thank you for your report, I think Ross will remember that I was looking for information that was more specific to Skye and Raasay. And unfortunately, the report before us today is sort of more generic and it's more Highland wide, which I've got to be honest, I'm quite disappointed about. But I'll let you give an introduction because I think, as you know, I have got a number of questions and queries, and I'm sure other members do too. So is it you or Ross, Shane, that's presenting?
Thank you, Chair. So noting your disappointment, I can only apologise because myself and Ross both thought the same thing, and we were both wrong. So we thought you wanted to see how Skye sat in the council policy, so that there was a better understanding by members of the council policy and how money was allocated, spent on street, off street, within the wider council policy, so that you could judge how Skye sat amongst that. We didn't at the time realise that you wanted specific numbers relating to Skye, but I'm sure we can answer all your questions as they arise, Chair, and any that the other members have. Okay. So the paper before you, members, as I've said, highlights council policy, where it sits with legislation for how we must deal with on and off street parking income. The paper's pretty self-explanatory, I think. And as you go through it, it points you to the relative legislation. It gives you some idea of the scale of the income that the council's collecting from both on street and off street, and how we report that to central government, Scottish government, as all local authorities must do when regards to decriminalised parking enforcement. It gives you some idea of where the annualised operational costs come from, so how we generate that figure, the £53 figure. I just might highlight to you that that does not include the business rates that the council has to pay for car parks, whether we charge for them or not. So it should be in the mid 80s, 80 odd pound should be what that sugar figure would be if we included our business rates. And we also in the paper give you the current situation with income generated on Skye, although we may have to give you some more focused information further to what the chair has highlighted. And we can give you a lot of that information today and send it out so that that can be seen. But we can actually give you that information today. We've prepared for those, answering those questions. And at the back of the paper, you can see the actual income and expenditure report that we have to issue every year. And this is the most recent one for 24-25. And that appears on the Scottish Government website, along with the other local authorities that implement decriminalised parking enforcement. So members, really, I think the time would be better spent with specific questions that you obviously have.
Okay, thanks, Shane. And I'm not going to make any apology for coming in first here. So I think for clarification, it was important that we got it contextualised how the income raised across the authority, the legislation around that. But clearly, Skye and Raasay Area Committee, I thought I made it clear we were keen to find out, our own position within that, because a lot of our residents are saying, look, all this money that's been raised is leaving Skye, going into a central pot, and yet we've got areas across Highland who aren't charging for parking, and that's nothing that you can control. But I think that was our frustration. So first question, 5.1, based on the information in 5.1, what is the income generated from on-street parking on Skye, and what is the cost of this service in Skye? Okay, in terms of 5.2, looking at the annual parking account where you've given us the annual income total and the annual expenditure, what is the full breakdown of income and expenditure for Skye and Raasay? Because again, we absolutely substantially put money into the bigger pot, of course. I see that there's mention in 7.1 and 7.2 about invitation to pay sites, which we don't have any on Skye. I'm sure you're aware of that. But again, getting back to that £53 per bay, which you've mentioned it's for annualised costs. I think it's sometimes quoted as being for maintenance, but clearly there is no revenue there's no revenue budget available for maintenance, and it comes out of the roads infrastructure budget. But yet I think right across the piece, and certainly members of the public think that the £53 per bay is for maintenance and such like. And again, I suppose if we're paying £53 per bay, and again, there's not a budget for maintenance, the question is, should some of that £53 be going into the maintenance roads budget, given some of the areas are charging, and we are paying, I would say, a premium of that. Now, the biggie for me is, so the table isn't actually telling us, because we are keen to find out, because while we know we've been told that income from on-street car parking can only be used for certain things, and some of it should be spent in places like Skye, we've never really been told where that income that we have that's been raised, and there is a substantial of on-street car parking, where that goes, and if any of it is invested back into roads on Skye. but certainly for off-street, the table that you've shown us doesn't really tell us where we are sitting at this current time in terms of our share of a off-street parking income, because we want to make sure that of off-street parking income is actually invested back into the communities and into roads infrastructure and, dare I say, parking infrastructure. And my last question, Shane, is we know that you've kindly awarded us, say, £40,000 to help with the resurfacing of the Broadford car park. And clearly members are going to look at how they can support that. But we would want to do that from our share of parking income. And that's why it would be good to understand what that is at this current time, even though it's not the end of the financial year. We'll come back to that one, Shane. We'll just go down to all members so that you've got all the questions that people have got. So we'll go to Councillor Miller next, and then Councillor Stewart.
Okay, right. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to repeat some of what you've said, I suppose. But hey, thank you, first of all, for the report, Shane. Though I think, to be honest, I feel a wee bit disappointed with the report for quite a few reasons. And I suppose, firstly, I think, and again, it's not your fault or remit, but I think the whole system is long overdue a refresh, and I hope that the council maybe will do that sooner rather than later. See, I don't really, or I fail to grasp, I don't understand, but maybe I fail to grasp is a better way of putting it, the idea of having the legacy car parks, such as Summerled Square in Portree, for example. Now, I was heavily involved way back as a shop owner who, along with many of my colleagues, business people in Portree, were concerned about out of town shopping, and we took a decision many years ago to ask the council to introduce car parking into Summerled Square, and that was the idea behind that, was to make sure that people couldn't park there all day, and then people coming to shop actually had nowhere to park. So now I think, because we don't get any input from legacy car parks, we are being penalised for the foresight, while other areas, such as we all know, for example, Dingwall, have free car parking and refuse to allow car parking to be included. So we are helping to pay for a service in areas that don't or won't allow car parking. Now, one of the biggest contentious issues from your report is the item which says £53 per day for annualised maintenance costs. And that's caused a huge amount of controversy, is the polite way of putting it, especially when likes of Summerled Square has had little or no maintenance for years. And yet the council take all the revenue, and our public expect, when we're paying parking fees, that at least some of it should be directly targeted to where the money is raised. So, your table 7.1 explains today how the sum is made up, and I accept that, but who besides us today has that explained to them? The public are completely unaware, and as I mentioned, that £53 has really got people fired up about what a load of nonsense that is. Now, in 8.1, I think it's understandable, I suppose, for our public, when they see the total monies collected for this area, to be concerned at the small amount which eventually is given back for members to agree how that is allocated. Our constituents are at a loss to understand as to where the money collected in parking fees in Ward 10 actually goes to. So, and I think it's all very well in the report where it says the parking service, and you've said it before quite a few times, the parking service doesn't have a budget for repairs, as in 7.2, etc., where you lay that out. But following years of our road budget being under-resourced, our network really needs every penny we have just to start getting the roads back to a suitable condition. And our public certainly weren't aware that any repairs to car parks was funded from our roads. And they're saying, well, that's not very fair given the huge amount of money that you're collecting in Skye. We're not getting a proper share of that to help with our infrastructure. So it's just, I think, a plea perhaps for more clarity from yourselves and from the council. And so, right, I said at the start, I think the system needs to be looked at, and I'm certainly going to be taking this up with the council leader who leads my group as well, to see how we can perhaps prepare for a new financial year and looking at the budgets going ahead. And I hope that maybe the chairman will take his concerns forward with the convener as well, because I do believe, after all this rant I've had, slight rant, council needs somehow to inform our community much better how the services are delivered and how the parking finances are distributed. Thank you.
Okay, and finally, Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think there's a surprising amount of consensus on this issue, actually. And I mean, I won't repeat the points that have been made, but you know, in short, our communities are being shortchanged, and that's certainly the way that many people feel with this. So I don't know, Chair. It's good to hear that Councillor Miller is going to take this up, and I hope you do the same. But I'm wondering if, as a committee, it might be worth, I don't want to say noting, because I don't think it would need to be an additional recommendation, but just as an area committee expressing our disappointment with the current arrangement, and perhaps, you know, making it known that we formally would like to see something changed with this to make sure that there's equity, because I don't think, you know, from what we're hearing, that, you know, we don't want to pay our way by any means, but, you know, there's paying our way and then there's getting, you know, our pockets picked, which is, you know, very much what seems to be happening. So I think equity is the name of the game with this. So I think if we could get some, you know, formal notification that we're not happy and that we would very much welcome the conversation around change, that would go a long way to appeasing not only our communities but also, you know, taking that positive step towards delivering the change that I think we're all in agreement is long overdue.
Okay, thanks, Rudy. And I think it's important to state that I have been in conversation with the senior officers, the ace for the service, and I think we might be seeing something coming forward in the very near future. Okay, right, Shane, it's back to you.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll address Councillor Miller and Councillor Stewart's points. So Councillor Stewart, yeah, I have no real comment to make other than your consensus is welcome, and that it is a council policy decision. So it's full council that really this needs to be addressed at. It's not something that myself and fellow officers can deal with at this committee. Councillor Miller, yeah, so you touch on similar subjects, but you also talk about the legacy status of many of these car parks. And just to reassure you members to a degree, and you probably already realise this, but you're not alone in that Inverness and Fort William both have legacy car parks, and many of them generating the same sums of money that you see generated in Skye, and have been for a lot longer. And those sites do not contribute to any local income generation. So, you know, Inverness is the multi-storey and numerous other car parks which have been generating income for decades, and that has gone to council services, and so have Fort William. So you're not alone, members. That's all I would say on your points.
Okay, just to say, Shane, on that point, just to say that, I mean, I think members are accepting of the policy that from 2021, but it's the increase in parking charges at legacy car parks. And I have discussed with officers the paper from December 21, and we've both got different interpretations. But I think our argument is that when there have been parking charge increases agreed, it should be a share of the parking charge increases from legacy car parks.
Point well taken, but I again, I wasn't actually addressing that point, Chair, but I will address it. And I've just gone and lost my email. Hold on, I'll just bring it back up again so I make sure I cover all your points. Just bear with me a second. Skye Committee. Go. So yeah, so as you've highlighted, Chair, I'll go through the points that you've raised. So section 5.1, which was income generated on street parking in Skye. I've dropped a set of tables into the chat, which I'll also share on the screen. Just bring that up on screen just now for you and share that if the system will allow me to do so. Can you see that, members? Yes, good. So there's the current situation as of October 2025. And you can see that we've split this information. And going forward, the updates that we provide you at area business meetings will split the two tables so that you can see what's being generated on street and what's being generated off street. And then the table at the bottom, the third one, gives you what you receive in your area split. So you can see that we're currently sitting at £207,000, but that's year to date, members. So 204,000 last year in total. Year to date, we've got 207,000. But as you can see on the top table, there's the breakdown of income from off-street car parks, and you can see the two legacy sites in italics, the Green and Summerlid Square. And then you can see the 4 on-street sites and the income that's generated there. So for transparency purposes, obviously this meeting's been recorded, so this information will be available to anybody who wishes to see it. We've got nothing to hide, you know, that's not our intention. Going forward, you'll get that breakdown whenever we give you an update during the course of the year, so you know where we're sitting. So I'll just take that off for a moment, and as I say, that information's in your chat as well, so you can have another look at it as I talk. So what wasn't in that table is you asked about the penalty charge income that's generated on Skye, and it's 304,000 that's generated to date this year in penalty charge income, and 166,500 in on-street income. Now, to focus on those 2 points, and the third point that you asked about, item 5.1, which was how much costs relate to Skye. So it's quite difficult for us to give you that figure because we have a centralized cost center that covers all the parking services costs. So all the staff wages, the equipment, the parking services, third-party contract, IT equipment, all the other specialisms that happen to allow us to implement decriminalised parking enforcement are handled through a centralised cost code. We don't break it down by area. The only costs we break down by area are site specific, so it's things like the costs of the parking meter, the costs of cash transactions, card transactions, all those localised costs. We can get them for you, and they're in the tables which we use to generate your income split for area committees. Now, we've done a little bit of work on getting an idea of the costs for Skye, but that's all they are, members. They're not, you know, and we're in the £400,000 mark to run the services on Skye, just based on the percentage of the income you generate, the percentage of staff you have, etc., etc. We proportionally allocated it, and it's in that sort of ballpark. The cost to run a parking services on Skye is in excess of £400,000. I can be no more specific than that, members. But you did ask the question, Chair, so it gives you some indication of what the costs are. Now, again, I come back in item 5.1 to the parking account and some of the references to legislation within that report. So, concerning legislation and the priority of the council when running decriminalised parking enforcement, first and foremost, we must not be a cost to the council. So the priority of every local authority that runs decriminalised parking enforcement is not to burden the council with any cost, therefore reduce funds that are available for other service provision. So we don't want to be taking money away from education, social work, roads, or any other budgets when we're running the decriminalised parking enforcement service. So to allow that to happen, the legislation basically says that first and foremost, you use all your on-street income, which includes penalty charges, which includes any pay and display, which includes any other sales you may have, like permits, to run the service, to finance the service. And that's what the council does. So when I reference the parking account, you can see once we add up all the income, once we add up all the costs, the last financial year, we ran a deficit of about £12,000, roughly. And what we actually do is we draw some money down from the off-street enforcement to help balance that account, because there's primary benefit to off-street income because there is decriminalised parking enforcement officers on site in uniform, which encourages people to pay to park. So there is a benefit, and I think last year we drew down about 8% from memory, but that's in the report. So that's item 5.1. And hopefully
maybe just to
members,
come back in there,
sorry,
Shane, just for
sorry.
clarification then. And I think this is the point that Councillor Miller was trying to make. So the cost to cover the service, and you've indicated that comes from on street and for parking enforcement fees. Yep.
Yes.
So essentially, those areas that do charge and have parking enforcement are subsidising those areas who choose not to charge for parking.
Only in one element, because the whole council has parking enforcement. So we issue penalty charge notices on every regulated road in the Highlands. So wherever there's a waiting or loading restriction, we issue penalty charge notices. And when wherever we find somebody parked on a pavement, blocking a drop curb, etc., we issue penalty charge notices. So that's council-wide, and we operate council-wide. And where you say that there's obviously off-street parking income, a small percentage of that may or may not be drawn down each year in the parking account to balance our parking account. Last year, I think it was 8% we drew down of the total income generated to help balance the parking account, to show that we weren't costing the council the council's general services. So yes, to a degree, in a very small element as far as off-street parking income's concerned. But as far as enforcement's concerned, that's a council-wide activity. You know, there's nowhere that doesn't happen. Obviously, the busier you are, the more penalty charges may be issued, as can be reflected in Skye's high tourist rates and visitor rates. And similarly, you know, in comparison, Lochaber and Inverness have high penalty charge issue related to maybe other areas where there's just less people and less vehicles. 5.2, income and expenditure, I've covered. I think I've given you the information that you're after, members, yes. And we will obviously, going forward, those details will be open and clear whenever we update you. So should be no confusion going forward. 6.1. Now, this is getting to the point that you made, Chair, and I think Drew was, and I will let Drew in now. Drew, before, no, okay, no, you had your hand up. Sorry, Chair, I'm doing your job there. Sorry for that, apologise. I just thought you had a question relating to something I just talked about. Anyway.
No, I just want to come in at the end to say something, but that's fine.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Okay. So the issue around, obviously, share. Now, decisions were made at council, the E&I committee and full council relating to policy. Now, we came into existence in 2016, members. So this only became an issue in 2016. And as I've said already, for decades before that, all parking income went into the council's general fund. Didn't matter where it came from, just went into the council. So I think we've improved things by creating decriminalised parking enforcement, because we updated the policy and moved towards this localised funding model. And I know it's not 100% members, but you know, I think it's a step change and a move forward, so the communities do see money coming back to their communities from the money generated in their communities. So it's not the end. It's not a bad news story. I think it's a good news story, and I appreciate members would like to see a bigger good news story. That's something that will be dealt with at other committees, I think, members. So when we touched on this issue about budgets and the localized split. So when we raise parking tariffs, so we review parking tariffs annually, and over the course of recent years, the council's made the decision to increase parking tariffs. I think our minimum off-street parking charge is now £3, but that may vary from 1 hour to 4 hours, depending on where you are and the nature of the car park. So it has local input from members to decide, well, the council's decided the minimum charge for off-street parking is X, but we as members have agreed that value will get you so much time to suit that car park and to suit the business that car park is there to operate. So I hope that's clear. I hope members understand that element of local input. Now, discussions were had at previous committees which indicated that we would share that income increase in tariffs. Now, that was preconditioned on budgets being met. So when members set a budget for the parking services, if we don't meet that budget, then you know we've got a budget pressure. Now we can't share zero in the budget. You know, if we're short on the budget that's been set by council, there's nothing to share beyond the fixed sharing 50% of that had been agreed. And the other problem that we have as officers is, how do we calculate beyond that, you know, very clear defined 50%? How much of part of a sale do we share locally? And we as officers can't come up with an equation to work that out, because, and I'll give you an example. We raised the minimum fee for parking by 30% last year, from £2 to £3. Parking income for off-street car parks for the year to date has only gone up by 4.5%, members. So if we went to a single car park and said, oh, the minimum charge has gone up by 30%, so we're going to share 15% of that with members. Well, the number of £3 sales may have reduced, members, and people have started paying for £5 sales because it gets them an extra hour or 2 hours beyond the £3 sale. It is incredibly difficult, nigh on impossible, for us as officers to work out what extra income that increase in sale may have generated. We can only look at the car park as a whole. How much money did it generate this year, and how much is 50% of that is going to be shared with members? If we then try and look at a legacy car park that has no share with members, but there's a view to sharing any increase in parking, well, how do we know how much of that car park has gone up? And if the car park sales go down, members, are you going to give us what's missing? So if the sales go down, are you going to give us the deficit as a service? You see how it's virtually impossible. It's virtually impossible to look at car park sales from the point of view that you increase, if you increase the individual tariff for a period of time, then you've got to share some of that locally. It's just not mathematically possible, members.
Okay, I think it is, but we're not going to discuss that today. And we can have that discussion at an area business meeting. I think there's a pretty straightforward formula to do that.
Okay.
But we can do that another time.
Okay, thank you. Good, I can move on. 7.2, 7.1, 7.2. Yeah, apologies. The word invitation to pay was just an error from a previous report in which we discussed a similar issue with another committee, and it should have just said pay and display. So that wasn't any clue to anything we were planning for Skye. That was just a misprint. Now that the £53, okay. So the annualized maintenance fee prior to us coming into existence, i.e. parking services, nobody was calculating the cost that was sitting on the books for the council with off-street car parks. Nobody was working out what risk is the council carrying. And so part of the things that we started doing was, well, let's understand what we're dealing with. What is the risk that we're carrying? Because as Drew probably recalls, previously, if a car park was to get fixed, in inverted commas, it would be done by the roads team. We didn't exist. Parking services didn't exist. Roads would have to find some money, get some tar down, and paint some lines. Nothing's changed, members. Nothing has changed. That same scenario remains. It's always been a function of the road service to maintain our roads infrastructure. The sole purpose of car parks are to help support the roads infrastructure. So the vehicles that are driving on the roads need somewhere to park safely in between those journeys. Now, the point which members make is about where does that money go? That's a point to be made, as you rightly highlighted, at other committees. But at least now we have an understanding of what that value should be. Prior to us coming into existence, there was no understanding of what that value should be. So we took a very general sample of different car park sizes, took a sample of the sort of amenities that are being supplied in them, whether that be waste bins, whether that be street lighting. We've got water bills, business stream water bills we pay for every car park. And also we pay business rates for every car park, whether we get an income from them or not. So we understand now what sort of costs a car park has on its lifespan, 40-year lifespan. And that's where the £53 per bay measurement comes from, members. And as you've highlighted, that money's currently deducted from any income we generate at any car park, whether it's invitation to pay, excuse me, or whether it's a full mandatory pay and display. And that goes into the council's central budget. And then just like the budget for roads maintenance, each year a budget is agreed for roads maintenance and drawn down and spent locally with members' priorities. So that's the avenue that needs to be sought when it comes to seeking that. And I'll try and move on. 8.1. Yeah, there was 7,000 penalty charge notices, by the way. Sorry, members. When earlier on when I said how much, there was that was actually 7,000 penalty charge notices that were issued. You have those figures. The 8% figure that was drawn, it was 8% that was drawn down. And there was a question about some of the other costs that are shown. £54,000 that is deducted from the car parking reports for Skye relates to Store and Bayfield capital funding repayments. Store and Bayfield. So that there was some clarity sought on that as well. So obviously we deduct from any income some of the loan repayments that the council has to make for the capital borrowing that brought those car parks into existence in the first place. So it's split between Store and Bayfield. That's me, really.
No, thank you for that, Shane. And I suppose that I think the point I made earlier was some of these repayments. My argument is that some of the on-street money that's been raised in Skye should be contributing to meeting these costs. But again, I think what's clear, and it's nothing you've got control over, is that we need a review of parking strategy, parking policy, and I think what you're hearing certainly from Skye members is that's something that we are going to be keen to promote and speak to our colleagues, politician-wise and senior officer-wise, because I think that needs to happen, not just for our area, but I think across the parking policy for Highland. And I thank you for articulating and giving us the answers as best you could. And we'll discuss that formula. I think is quite simple at some stage, Shane. But anyway, we'll go to Councillor Miller and Councillor Gillis quickly before we move on to the next item. Councillor Miller.
Okay, thanks so much. Yeah, I think, and thank you, Shane, for explaining pretty well the whole problem and your response to the comments and questions. I think, though, we need clarity given to the public and especially community councils about this £53, because you know, and I'm not going to go back into detail. I think maybe, and we have corporate comms in attendance, and I'm sure they will hopefully do something about that, because all the community councils I go to, they have concerns about the parking and about, especially the Portree one, concerns about this £53. And also the deductions, which you made quite clear today, I think, if I picked you up right, £900,000 approximately collected in parking, and we get 200 and something thousand for there. So you made that quite clear. The real concern I do have, though, and we haven't touched on it yet, is workforce planning. Because the money that you're collecting, and you're doing a great job, and I would have to compliment the staff who do, your enforcement officers in Skye, that I know them all. When I see them and I talk to them and I see them talking to the public, they are fantastic ambassadors while they're issuing the parking tickets. They do it so well. But my concern is we haven't got enough, and what happens if some of them decide to retire or move away or whatever, because I know already one I think has moved. So I just have huge concerns about the chaos that will ensue if we do not have enough parking attendants. And if we look at going ahead in the future, we have a Coral Beach, Nice Point, and even at the moment, the guys cannot cover adequately the number of parking pay for display car parks we have. And if we extend Broadford or we extend whatever, we are going to have a huge pressure on these guys. So what is your status for workforce planning, and what are you hoping to achieve in the next financial year? So, and that's me. Thank you, Chairman, for allowing me back in.
Okay, I'll quickly go to the other two members, Chrissy quickly, and then Rudy.
Yeah, this is just a quick accounting question. Where does the information, so within 7.1, where you've broken down all of that, those costs for that £53, where is that actually included in the allocations from the costs that are actually in the income and expenditure? Because I'm not quite seeing where they fit in. Thank you.
We'll go to Rudy for the final question, then Shane, back to you.
Yeah, it's more of a question for you, Chair. Actually, you see the car parks that we get no money from, the ones where Shane and the service just retain all of it. I know what Councillor Miller was saying earlier on about the reason that people wanted this back in the day was to allow sort of passing trade and people to come and go. If we're not getting any money from it, Chair, would it not be wise of us perhaps to consider making them free for half an hour? Because that would be a benefit to local pockets, but it would also ensure that there was turnover of people in the square. And I mean, if we're getting no money off of it, then why should anybody else?
Okay, I think, Councillor Stewart, when we introduce parking charges, there is community engagement, and I think Ford Road and Broadford, I think it's half an hour free, so it does happen. But I think I think the point I was making, Rudy, is that we need a pretty comprehensive review of this. And if that doesn't bear fruit, then we maybe need to look at some other more localised solutions. Okay, Shane, back to you.
Thank you, Chair. So, Drew, the service are bringing forward a paper which is actually titled Workforce Planning for Parking Services, and is looking at increasing the number of staff in Skye, as well as other areas where enforcement is required. So we are working with senior management to bring forward the requirement to recruit, and that will be digested in due course. And our goal is to try and get that ready for next year, next season, if that gives you some comfort. And again, we both members have talked about the £53. So the £53 doesn't sit in the parking account, Councillor Gillis. The parking account is what we publish to the Scottish Government. It's an accounting procedure they lay out and what the figures they want to see in that. So the £53 is what we, as the service, have agreed is the actual cost of car parks, whether they're paying display or not, taking aside what income they generate. What risk does the council hold with that asset? And we've done work which has been agreed that estimates it at about £53 per bay per year, based on a lifespan of 40 years. And some car parks are obviously a lot older than that. And that money goes in, right now, goes into the council central fund. And then it's, as with the roads budget, there's a revenue and a capital side, and members have made the point that that's not being dealt with specifically in relation to car parks, and should be. And I look forward to see what comes forward from members at other committees on that subject. A note of caution for Rory, and the point that you've made, Councillor Finlayson, is just that any decision on car parking has a budget implication. So members must remember that locally they make decisions, and we always work closely with members to get those decisions implemented. It also has to sit in with the decisions that members make at a budget level when they're setting budgets for parking services, for example. You know, on one hand, we want to make it free here, but we want you to make more money there. So just bear that in mind, members, that there's always going to be this contention between setting budgets and the impact local decisions have on those budgets. Thank you.
Okay, Shane, I think you have had a good look at this, and we thank you for answering the questions that we did have. And I think we just need to make sure that next time when we bring a report, whoever the chair is, and you and Ross, we agree, we were very clear about what it is. But I do appreciate the fact that you did look to answer the queries that we had. And I think that the overall message is that I think we as members do understand our roles as local councillors and as Highland councillors. But I think it's a review of parking services and parking policy is long overdue. But can I thank you for attending? Ross, I don't know whether you were struck dumb by me or by Shane, but if there's anything you want to say before we leave.
No, I'm struggling with coughing fits constantly, which is why Shane's done most of the talking. I've got a bit of a cold, and it's hitting me that way.
Yourself. So. Okay, thank you both, and we'll see you, I'm sure, again in the near future.
Thank you, members.
Okay, members, quickly moving on, we've got the roads maintenance update. So we've got Mackenzie with us to give us an update. So thanks for your paper, Mac. I think it shows that the work that we have been doing, I think it shows that the increased expenditure that we have had in terms of the strategic pot as well as our own pot. So you want to give us a quick summary and then we can go to questions.
Yeah, good afternoon, members. Chair, thanks for inviting me along. If you're okay, I will share the paper. Just bear with. Just takes a wee second to do this. If you members can say whether they see that.
Yep. Yes, we can see it.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so members are invited to or asked to note this update. Given I have given one so far at every one of your committees, just as a general update and a sort of progress report of how we're going along. As the chair mentioned there, it mentions in it that the structural overlay or the allocation is 521,000 with the surface dressing in addition to that. So roughly £860,000, but along with the strategic allocation, that puts it up, and the structures budget, sorry, it puts it up to 3,001,638. So I don't know why I struggle to say that. If we go to the appendix, if members are happy and they've read the report, if we go to the appendix, this really gives an update of where we are. It's accurate to the day that I wrote it, which was a couple of weeks ago. But due to the sort of the poor weather we're having, we haven't really advanced much on beyond that. So it states in this the activity, so it's either overlay or surface dress or inlay. Inlay is where we have planed out a section, Dunvegan especially. Big plane out section had to happen before we could inlay it because of all the structural ironwork and curbs that are there. And it also talks about surface dress as well, which is what surface D is. So this here talks about the scheme length and total, and then the total area. The reason why it's important to put that is some of our roads are single track, some are double, some are kind of single and a half. So it's the total area is as important, sometimes more important. So these are all the jobs. I'm sorry, I'm just whizzing down them, but these are all the jobs that we have completed thus far. And it shows that we are sitting at £2.9 million spent so far. There have been additional works that have been completed. There was £90,000 worth of works done on the U4869, which was with additional funding from SSE. Business contributions, this was works that were done in Portree and also down the Mall Road, and that was with, as I say, with business assistance 50/50, assistance with that. And developer contribution, £340,000 worth of work done on the Hornival Road, that was SSE contributions as well. That's all the works completed in yellow. So the works that haven't been highlighted in yellow is works that we have still to complete. And again, they're there for members to read. This was agreed at the February committee. These are the ones we're going to look at. There's also an additional at the bottom that we hope to do, which is £85,000 worth of work on the Staffin Road. We have planed the Staffin Road out. Councillor Miller will know that. And we are, once we get finished in the south end, we'll be coming up to overlay that. In addition to this, there's also been additional, I'm going to stop sharing this one just now, sorry, and add, there's also been white lining work, which was pretty extensive, which I can show you just now as well. I have that. So, sorry, I apologise. So we had jet patching work happening at the same time. So where it was recognised that there was a lot of work to be done on there was a lot of work to be done everywhere, to be fair, but I had to try and prioritise the A-class roads. So the road from Uig going through Staffin into Portree was in a really poor condition, but I was acutely aware that there was a lot of work needing to be done everywhere else as well. So I had we'd hired in a jet patcher to go around and look at the roads that were suitable for that type of work. Jet patcher will, in some instances, in actual fact, completely repair a road if it's low traffic or low stress. But if I can maybe give an example, so the Haste Road, for instance, if you look at the majority of it, it's pretty low stress. It can be high speed at times, but the traffic is quite low. So jet patcher is fine in there. But we also did the junction that's down at the Haste Road junction, which is high stress because it's braking and turning. So that won't last as long. But it does hold it until such times as we can get it with either next year or the year after's capital programme. So that's really what that's about. And it also talks about, we had centre lining. That was a company that we brought in as well. I centre lined all of the centre lines on all the A-class road that we have. I also edge lined through the villages and wherever there was sort of a build up of houses to show the traffic that that's what was happening and try and slow it down a little bit. The only sections that we didn't do are sections that I knew that I was going to be overlaying or surface dressing, because it was it would be a waste of money. There was one section or one area from Borv to Dunvegan that I'd done quite a lot of patching on, and the road condition was actually pretty good beyond the patching, so I surface dressed it. So there was an area there that I did actually surface dress over lining, which was disappointing, but it's how the programme had progressed. And we also had a company in doing junction lining, and I had to prioritise the sort of high speed, high trafficked areas for that. I would have liked to have done an awful lot more in the sort of built up areas with them, but I had to look at the, okay, so we'll talk about the Carbis junction, which is really quite a complicated junction when there's no lines there. So that is the money that we have spent thus far. I will add, I'm going to stop sharing, that as well as my own capital programme that I will deliver before the end of the financial year, I'm also in negotiations with SSE, and I hope to be able to tell members pretty soon that we are going to be surfacing a big section of the Waternish area, which is in really poor condition, and with funding from SSE and some additional areas. But as I say, we're in early stage talks with them. So if members have any questions for me, Chair, thanks for letting me speak.
Okay, thanks, Mark. I think this report does articulate, all the works that have been going on, and I know, and I think we all recognise that we've still got lots of roads that aren't in great condition, but that's the nature of the beast. We've just got such a large road network, and as we've often said, unfortunately, our roads, a lot of our single track roads, were not designed for the volume of traffic that we're now seeing in them, particularly with large camper vans and the number of tourists that we see on these roads. As I say, I think we just need to make sure that we as members keep pushing the need for additional resource here, because quite often people quote the number of residents. So we've got 12,000 residents, but in the summer we've got 1 million people coming to the area. So we just need to keep pushing to get you as much resource as possible. Okay, are there any particular questions? Councillor Miller, we'll give you Lou have the last word.
Well, I doubt that. But no, there's one or two questions, but I think, to be honest, the report in front of us today, it lays it out quite nicely. And I would agree with what you've just said yourself, obviously. There's a lot more work to be done, and we have to be doing our best to ensure that we get the same level of funding for future years, because the volume of traffic is well, we all know it's horrendous. So I think the public, you pointed out on your last slide, Mac, the bit about the white lining. I think that obviously, again, the community councils I go to are quite keen to see more white linings carried out. So I hope maybe, I don't know if you can give the public some reassurance today that you're doing your best to access the white lining equipment for areas that still need to be done. And I think it's came up again that it's really the only two community councils that I go to that have this issue is the drainage. When I say drains, like Perchee specifically, the vast majority of our drains are blocked. I've raised this with you already. I think maybe some reassurance that, again, you're doing your utmost to access machinery and equipment to solve that problem, because it does have an effect on the roads. So, no, I'm looking forward to your next report, where we'll be looking at hopefully your planned works for the next financial year, because I think that's going to be quite important. And generally, I would have to say, the vast majority of the public are understanding, and they appreciate the effort that your men and ladies, your work squad, are doing. And I think we should mention the hard work that they're doing throughout the summer, when the weather has not been particularly clement. So I think that we should recognise the hard work your squad are doing, and of course the men at the quarry, or the workforce, sorry, the workforce at the quarry as well. The workforce, because without them we would not have the roads in the condition they are. And just one good positive point, I went to Staffin, it was actually to a funeral service just last week, and I did not observe one pothole between the Torrevik Redend and the village of Staffin. So that just says how much a benefit the people around Skye are getting from your work today. So thank you very much for the report and for all the work you guys are doing.
Okay, you are right. You haven't got the last word. Chris has got the last word.
No, I was just wanting to come in on a couple of things, mainly just that prioritisation of work, and that flexibility of if there is something else that has come in, especially when it's come up quite a few times with some of the community councils that I've been working with, when they have been identifying some really, really kind of serious road deterioration, and the way that the staff, when they have the chance, have been getting in and actually doing that work. But I know you possibly missed this from earlier in the meeting. The Police Scotland actually mentioned in their own report that the works that have been done over the last couple of years, especially in the hotspots where we have a lot of tourism, that's made a big difference to their call out rates in those areas for people, you know, having issues and things like that. So just to pass along that thanks to the workforce. Obviously we've moved on from the 80s when there were 9 people working on Callum's Road for nearly a year, but hopefully we'll get close to there again sometime.
Okay, thanks. So I'll try and answer in reverse, and if I miss anything, I apologise. So it's always heartening when you get a bit of positive feedback like that from the cops. It was very difficult for both ourselves and themselves to try and deal with those incidents, and I think as we've progressed through that additional work using the islands funding and our own workforce, the difference to our service, to myself, meant that you weren't answering call outs, 3, 4, 5 call outs a day all the way through the winter and all the way through the summer. So it saved the service an awful lot of stress and hassle, and we haven't had to put guys out there operatives out there, sorry Drew, to deal with those issues. It just so happens, in actual fact, most of the operatives are guys, which is why I tend to see guys. How do we, so the ability to be flexible and to flex into those situations, Councillor Gillis, is quite tricky. So in order to fulfil this size of capital programme, it requires every single person that we have on the squad. So we tend to, if there's particularly inclement weather, or we have guys on holidays or guys sick that has reduced our capacity to go out and do our capital works, we will then turn all bodies onto doing that sort of pothole repair. And it might feel that those communities are being abandoned a little bit, because we used to be able to have a quicker response to that. But it's just the nature of trying to spend, or try to spend £3 million on a capital programme. It does suck every single bit of life and out of the men. We've mentioned the men previously, so members got us the additional money and the men laid it. It's just as simple as that. They've done a really, really good job. So it's a tricky one to I wouldn't want to give them too hard time about not going fixing potholes, because I'm asking them to do such a big job. But when we have the capacity, we don't sit in the tea hut and have a cup of tea. We go out and we do those other priorities that come. It's just a shifting priority. Councillor Miller, so if we go to the gully sucker and the state of the gullies in Portree, it was ever thus. That doesn't mean to say it's a good response. So we have a share of a gully sucker. It's a tricky thing to share, because what tended to happen in the past, and this would be echoed throughout all areas. This isn't a Skye specific thing. If you're sharing a gully sucker with an area, you want it when you can resource it. And in actual fact, you want it when it's raining, because that helps you when you're doing that work. We all fight and we all battle for that same window of operation. It's something that we talk about a lot, and how do we make it better? And it's something that as soon as I've got an answer for you, I will. I will, of course, ask when I can get it, and I'll give you an update of when it can actually arrive. But it will have to be at a time that I can resource it as well, because it does take a couple of men out the squad. So again, when I'm trying to do that capital work, it's a tricky one to try and programme. I'm fully aware the detrimental effect of having those gullies blocked. The water is our biggest problem. So I agree with you wholeheartedly on that one. I'll get to it, and I'll get it fixed as soon as I can. The white lining, the centre lining and the edge lining is always contracted in work. We do have our own white liner that we have our allocation and our share of, and they were up and they helped us out, and they did a section of work down on the Elgo Road doing edge lines on particularly high edges. So it was really, really good work that they'd done. And when I get them back, I will have them doing centre lines. And if we don't have a big enough, because let's face it, there's centre lines and edge lines to be done all over the Highlands of Scotland, and we've only got one squad, so it's pretty tricky to, that piece of copper wire is pretty thin to try and get them to be everywhere at once. If we can't get them, I will go again through the capital budget, and we will get a contractor in to cover those miles. Junction markings, though, I fear is more of an issue than the centre lines, because most of it is centre line now, and any section that isn't should have a sign on it at the start and the finish saying no lining. So I've been in discussions with Fleet, and I've got what I think is a pretty good bit of news actually. With the reorganisation of all the fleet and lorries and how they're moving around, there's a lorry that I'm going to swap. I've got a MAN 12-tonner, and I'm looking to swap with a DAF 12-tonner, and that DAF 12-tonner is a hook lift, and it's got a brand new lining body on the back of it. It's got a box and it's got a gritter. So that I am hoping that comes to Skye really soon. It's a combination. It's a good fix. Now that lorry is due for replacement. What happened maybe 6 or 7 years ago, I think we had a hook lift that had a white liner body on it, but the lorry went away for renewal, and the lorry that came back couldn't take the white liner body, so the white liner body went to Fort William, and that was the right thing to do because we didn't have a lorry in another area that could use it. So this is me getting it back, and that means we will have a new white lining body, and when that lorry is replaced, I've been assured by Fleet that we'll have a lorry that'll suit it. And so our junction markings, we will be able to start making inroads with our junction markings. It's not particularly labour intensive. I think the skills that we had 6 or 7 years ago, we don't have now because those people have left. But we do have colleagues over in Ward 5 that have got those skills and tickets just on the other side of the water. So I will be discussing with them how we use that resource between us, their men, our lorry. I'm sure there's something we can work out there. So that's hopefully good news. And that's really for in and around Portree at the rural junctions, going down through Broadford, Callack, and all of the lining that's been missing for many years. I'm acutely aware of the risk to me and everyone else because those lines are missing. So I think I picked up everything. If I hadn't, please tell me.
No, that was good to hear, Mike. And as always, we have regular engagement with you, so we thank you for that, and we also thank you for coming to committee today. So thanks you for your attendance. Okay, members, the last couple of items we've just got to look at. There's a summary of ward discretionary budget allocations. That's just for noting. And then the minutes of the previous meeting are circulated. So I think that brings us to the end of committee. So can I thank you all for your attendance and for your contributions. And we'll see you all again probably very soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks now. Cheers.